Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this great celebration of the 160th
Hello,
anniversary.
everyone. Thank you for joining us at this great celebration of the
this great celebration of the the Medium's book and participating at this 15th U.S. Spiritist Symposium. This is our second year that will be a virtual event, and today is the second day that we are having the symposium. If you missed yesterday, make sure to check it out in video. Don't miss. Yesterday we had a great learning of the mediums and mediumship. My name is Tanya Schwartz, and I'm representing the United States Spiritist Federation, the board of directors, and the organization of the symposium. I would like to thank all our members who have been very supportive all these years in all the efforts that we have made and continue to make to disseminate Spiritism in the US. And thank you to all the individuals and the Spiritist groups that have sponsored our annual event. This is have been happening for 15 years and in different cities. This is, like we said, our second year virtual, but we'll go back eventually being together in person. These Spiritist groups have been bringing to us all the resources with speakers, presenters, and workers in many capacities for the symposium to be possible. So has been always a pleasure to work with so many great people. Of course, it wouldn't be possible and wouldn't be a success if were not for our viewers that are from all the US and many other countries. So thanks to all of you. Now, let's sit back and enjoy this spiritual banquet, lot of learning. And please feel the friendship vibes from all of us and all the blessings from the high spirits. Let me introduce our presenter today, Leonardo Vieira, from the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. Welcome, Leonardo.
Thank you, Tanya, and good afternoon, everyone, to this amazing second day of the event, right? We spent a good time of yesterday learning and sharing a lot of information. And on behalf of the Spirit Federation, United States Spirit Federation, I would like to welcome everyone to this second day of the 15th U.S. Symposium. We will be sharing a couple hours together as we give continuation to, as we said, collective amazing work that was started yesterday. We re-encountered many of our friends and learned a lot with them on that first day. And we would like to make the same thing, to do the same thing with this moment, these couple hours that we'll be here together today, enlightening ourselves together. If you missed the conference or part of yesterday, make sure to subscribe to the United States Spiritist Federation YouTube channel and watch the great lessons we learned then. Remember, as Josada Korngold mentioned yesterday, this is an event that is celebrating the 160 years of the Medium's book, hence the amazing topics around mediumship. If you haven't had yet the chance to read the Medium's book, it's time. It is a book that can answer many of our questions and our relationships with the spiritual realm as well. So let's continue discussing more about mediums and mediumship. Today we'll have 4 parts of this event. The first part, we will bring Kirsten DeMelo to discuss with us how to be a medium in current days. We'll have a break, and then we'll have a very interesting segment called Spiritism, Ask Me Anything, with a moderator and some speakers too. Then we'll have another break. Well, before we continue, for this part of the event, the AMA, Ask Me Anything, make sure that you send your questions to us. These questions will be analyzed and will be answered throughout the discussion there. We'll have another break, and then we'll have the youth panel. That is correct. We'll have a group of youth here with us discussing their take on mediumship as well. And then we'll finalize with Marcelo Netto with our visualization for world peace and health as well. Before we introduce our first speaker, let's say the initial prayer so we can start our day connected with the high mentors and our high spirits. To conduct the initial prayer, I would like to invite Edward Christie from the Inner Enlightenment Spiritist Society in New York. Edward. All right, we had a little disconnect there. So we'll go ahead and conduct the initial prayer ourselves. And we would like to invite everyone to take this moment to connect with our mentors, the mentors of our Spiritist home, the mentors of this nation as well as we do so. You may close your eyes and let us really connect with this amazing and encouraging moment that we have in front of us. We give thanks, first of all, for all the hard work from our brothers and sisters on both realms of life who have worked together to truly put this event months and months ago. And here we are, partaking in this banquet of love. Let us also ask for the protection, the guidance to all of our brothers and sisters who will be presenting to us and guiding us in the different topics of mediumship. May we all receive the enlightenment and we all put into practice what we will learn, what we have learned, and much more to come. May each one of us, our families, our friends be guarded with this topic in mind, because we understand that we are here temporarily, receiving, sharing all that is the good inside of us, hoping that we can grow together in this amazing march. And we thank Spiritism for the enlightenment that we receive in our lives. And so be it. So let us go back and continue in the matter of mediumship, mediums as well. And I would like to introduce Kirsten DeMelo. She will be helping us understanding if, in fact, spirits can influence our lives, and how can spirituality provide us guidance to help us in our daily lives. Kirsten DeMelo is an active board member at the Spirit Society of Baltimore. She was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and to Spirit's parents, and was a part of the Spirit Society of Philadelphia before moving to Maryland in 2011. She has participated in the Spiritist Society Medical Congress and multiple Spiritist Symposium here in the U.S. Professionally, she is a registered nurse with the Bachelor's of Science degree with experience in critical care, case management, and utilization management. Let us welcome Kirsten DeMelo, who will lead us onto the understanding of how to be a medium in current days. Kirsten, please.
Thank you so much, Leo, and thank you to the United States Spiritist Federation for inviting us, and thank you all for just being here as well. We are so excited to share Spiritism with everyone. How to be a medium in current days, especially now, more than ever. You know, coming out of or still enduring this pandemic, and how is it relevant? And who is a medium? I mean, these are all questions we've come across, and even on social media, or mainstream media, we can see this idea of mediumship. You know, thanks to those who spoke yesterday, the beautiful talks that were given yesterday already gave us a good understanding and background of the Medium's book and how important it is, when it was published, the breakdown of what the Medium's book is. And I think at this point we all understand that it's special guidelines from the superior spirits, and we also can refer to it in a sense as the sequel to the Spirit's book. We know the breakdown, the first and second part, the second part being the larger, and the second part consisting of 32 chapters. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but just for us to have a brief recap of some of the things that have already been discussed so we can refresh our mind. There's so much knowledge, and it's impossible to cover all of it in this 40-minute talks. We encourage you to read, do your own study, go back, listen to the talks from yesterday, listen again, study, and enlighten yourself, because it's something that we should always be doing and working towards. Something really interesting that when we were reading that came up, and this book is not yet in English, Seattle dos Mediums, and maybe we can really, really roughly translate it, maybe something in English to something to the effect of the Harvest of Mediums. Probably not, though. But you can drop in the comment section if you have a better translation of this title. But there's an amazing quote by Emmanuel, who is a Francisco Cândido Xavier, who was his spirit guide while Chico Xavier was on the planet Earth. And Emmanuel in this book says something very full, very, very, if we could use a human term, it's very nutrient dense, if you will. It's a great full explanation of what mediumship is. And he says, mediumship is an opportunity for service and improvement, rescue, and solution. We like to remember it with this acronym SIRS: service, improvement, rescue, and solution. This is the epitome of mediumship. It gives us a perfect overview of what mediumship and what we as mediums, what our responsibility is, what the purpose is, and before God. So it's a really great way for us to be reminded, service, improvement, rescue, and solutions. And for those of you who do read the Portuguese language, this is a fantastic book to dive into. It's super rich in information and knowledge about mediumship as well. So for us to also recap a few ideas that we know have been spoken about, we know that we are all mediums. We know that we are all influenced to one degree to another. The basic term medium just being intermediary. That's all that it is. And as much as a cable or a wire is an intermediary from one thing to another. So we're intermediaries between spirits and incarnates. And in the medium's book, it's defined as the following: every individual who senses the influence of spirits to any degree of intensity is a medium. This faculty is inherent to humankind. It therefore does not constitute an exclusive privilege, and there are very few individuals who do not possess in at least a rudimentary state. Thus, we can say that everyone is a medium to a certain degree. So we're immersed in this constant exposure of influences. We cannot run away from it. But we have this really important aspect of mediumship, of us being the medium, a very important responsibility that we have personally. And it's the dial, right? Because we can dial to the right vibration and be in tune with our spirit guide, with good spirits, with higher vibrations, or we can dial it back down, being closer to the lower vibrations. Now, sometimes this dial is our unconscious mind. It moves by itself. It's kind of like what in psychology they refer to as the shadows. It's that part of ourself that controls us more than we realize. And that's why it's really important for us to get to know who we are and what drives us, because it's also driving that dial on a day-to-day basis. And the more cognizant and self-aware we become, the more we get to know ourselves and be aware and live more intently, to live on purpose, the more we get to control that dial. Otherwise, we become slaves of our own dial, that we go from one extreme to another because we're not aware enough to know how to control our feelings, our emotions. We get triggered by this, that, and the third, by a family member, by a coworker. And that's totally normal. We're not bad people. You are not a bad soul or bad person or a bad spiritist if you get upset at your significant other or a coworker or a neighbor. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And so let us just be observant in a non-judgmental way and pay attention to the parts of us that come up. So let me explain what that is and why this is important. All of this plays into this idea of the dial, okay? Since we are mediums, since we are constantly we have this influence of spirituality, of spirits rather, in different intensities. Some it's a lot stronger, and you can't even begin to pretend that it's not there, and some it's much more lighter and soft and subtle. But regardless of which extreme or where we find ourselves on that spectrum, we still are undergoing this influence. So it's important that we understand this dial, which is ourselves, which is what drives us. So anytime a different part of us comes up, it's important for us to deal with whatever it is that's coming up for us. And that's a part of the process. When people always say, and even in the Spirits book, know thyself, we throw that term out there, but seldom is it really talked about. Oh, how do you get to know yourself? And some people say journaling and do this, and you can do those things. And those are great. And you should. But in real time, as things are happening, pay attention. Let's pay attention to how you're feeling and the thoughts that are coming to your mind. Joanna DeAngelis, in many of her books, and when we're going to discuss it here today, talks about doing this self-evaluation and how important that is. But we are all mediums, but we have to ask ourselves, what kind of medium am I serving as? And what kind of medium do I want to serve as? What is my goal? What is my purpose? We understand mediumship as discussed in the book Evolution in Two Worlds. And Andrea Luis says, mediumship is one of the incarnate human being's attributes, which is used to communicate with the discarnate. So we understand that basic understanding of what mediumship is. We understand that we are the ones that are allowing the influence of spirits from one end of the spectrum or another. So we do have this personal responsibility in it. We have a large personal responsibility in it. Not even talking about at the Spiritist Center and the actual mediumistic meeting itself. Everyone's job at the center is very important. Everyone in their own respect. But just as a sidebar, the director of a mediumistic meeting, it's such a huge responsibility. We learn a lot about that, and especially in the book that we mentioned earlier, in the Sierra dos Mediums, how important, how much responsibility, rather, we should say. Not how important, the amount of responsibility of a director of a mediumistic meeting has to constantly be self-educating, as well as all those who participate in said meeting. Just as a sidebar. But why should any of us care about mediumship? Some of you who are watching might think, well, Kirsten, I don't participate in a mediumistic meeting. I just attend my center. Or you might be new to Spiritism. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, how's this even relevant? I'm just learning the bare minimum. Well, it always is relevant. Regardless of where you find yourself at in your journey, it's so important to be self-aware and to understand this component and to always take it into consideration, this component. So for instance, when you go to your medical doctor or your healthcare practitioner, and he or she rather is doing an assessment of all of your symptoms and whatnot, and they're going to ask you an array of questions. And one of the many things they're going to ask you is, what kind of diet you have, exercise routines that you have, if any, et cetera, et cetera. So as Spiritists, when we are taking into account the things that are going on with us in our assessment of ourselves, or in assistance to others, we also have to take into consideration that we are all mediums. This plays a monumental role in our day-to-day lives. Yes, traumas, experiences all affect us, affect our personality, affect us, the immortal soul that we are. But we always have to consider that component that exists, and that is mediumship. But why is it important? Well, there's a great example in the Mediums book that you can consider and remember to take with you. Make a comparison. They say, a certain man has a secret enemy of whom he is unaware, and who, unbeknownst to him, spreads slander and everything of the vilest nature that he can engender. The man loses his fortune, his friends avoid him, and his inner happiness is completely upset. Since he cannot discover the hand that is injuring him, he cannot defend himself and ends up defeated. However, one day the secret enemy writes to him and betrays his identity. Having found out who his enemy is, the man can now expose him and recover his reputation. Such is the role of evil spirits, whose Spiritism provides us with the possibility of discovering and outsmarting. And we put a little asterisk next to the word evil because it's so important. It's so important. We can't emphasize this enough. It's so important that we remember that these obsessors, these spirits that are having a negative influence on us, it's highly likely that they were our own victims of the past. Oftentimes we may get into this habit of, saying evil spirits, they're bad, we want to push them away. They're terrible. How dare they? These things that might cross our mind. Well, it's important for us to remember to have compassion towards them. When we read in the Andrea Louise collection about the dramas of the multiple lives and, the books like Sex and Destiny or Action and Reaction, I mean, we look at like a case by case, and we look at someone's trajectory and the multiple lives they've lived. It makes sense. Whatever's happening to us, whatever influence or friend or not spirit is around us, it's not by chance. It's not random. It's not, I have bad luck. It is not. It's highly likely that somewhere in our distant past, we have a history. And even though we move on, others might not. That's why it's important for us to be aware of this potential aspect. Because the more we are aware of that which can harm us or threaten our health and well-being, then we know how to manage ourselves to not put ourselves at risk. So another example, and I'm going to use the medical field because it's the one we come from. So before you go into the operating room, there are what they call aseptic techniques that they utilize. Basically, it's technique where to make sure that there's like 0% of bacteria or anything that's passed from the surgeons to the patient, right? So they go in and they use a special scrub and they prepare themselves, and as well as the patient is prepared. So they go in already cognizant that germs are everywhere. Now, do we have to be crazy, always neurotic? No. But we need to be aware that it exists, even if we cannot see it. Other spirits exist. They're around us, and we can attract, quote unquote, good or bad, for lack of a better term, and we can tune our minds into higher ones. In the book by Andrea Louise, Between Heaven and Earth, we learn about a story of a woman who was being obsessed perturbed by her husband's deceased first wife. And for a long time, for many years, she cannot reach the second wife who's incarnated because the second wife, her vibration's too high. But the first wife who's discarnated still hangs around and just waits for the right time to just attack. And the time came when the second wife who was incarnated and she found herself in a bad situation and her vibration got lower because she was going through a really rough time. And that was the opening. That was the opening for her, from that spirit to connect to her and to begin to create this process of obsession that was beyond just a simple obsession. And you can read again more about it in the book Between Heaven and Earth by Chico Xavier by the Spirit Andre Louise. It's a wonderful book. And this also plays into mediumship affecting our day-to-day lives. In the medium's book, it says, we can therefore state that mediumship enables men and women to meet their enemies face to face, if we may so express ourselves, and combat them with their own weapons. Without this faculty, evil spirits act in the shadows, and counting on their invisibility, they truly do much harm. This also is why it's important for us to be aware. Why some lower order spirits, if you will, or spirits who don't wish for someone to progress on or be happy, the victims of our past, they will try to make us believe that they don't exist so that we are not aware of them, because it gives them a leg up. It gives them power over us. Because if we don't believe in them, if we just think they don't exist so I can live my life however I want with no repercussions, it's easier for them to access us. And we don't want that. We want to be able to be and to live with intention in a positive way. And we can view it as sort of like a preventative medicine, being self-aware, knowing yourself, and most importantly, working on your morality. Prayer, meditation, which we'll talk about as well, but working on your morality, your moral side, is absolutely one of the most significant things for us. Whether we're acknowledging mediumship or not, whether people believe it or not, our purpose is not to make everyone spiritist, but to change hearts, to help people to become a better version of themselves. Some might refer to this as connecting to their higher self, connecting with the divine. Every different religion has different terminologies for it. But at the end of the day, this is what it's about. And this is what allows us to achieve optimal levels of joy, happiness, fulfillment, is when we are working on being our best self, which also includes mental health. And there's this fantastic book that is in English now for, I don't even know, maybe a year, 2 years, or give or take. And it's we always say this, we know, we realize we always emphasize all these books, but this is a monumental book that now it's in English. If you don't have a copy of this book, you're doing yourself a disservice, especially if you are a spiritist worker. We are going to be so bold as to say this. If you are a spiritist worker and you are part of a board of a spiritist center or organization, you have the responsibility to read this book. Dare we say that? God forgive us for saying such a strong term or a phrase. But the amount of information that Dr. Manuel Filomeno de Miranda shares in this book that's entitled Psychiatric and Spirit Obsession Disorders by the medium Divaldo Franco, the famous Brazilian spiritist medium, is unreal. And it's just so beautiful. So we shared just one little snippet from this book when they talk about how important mediumistic meetings are to our overall mental health and the purpose of it. Dr. Miranda says, mediumistic activities, especially those dedicated to disobsession therapies, constitute a magnificent chapter in Spiritist psychiatry, as it penetrates the root causes of psychological and mental disorders. Since it is the spirit that is ill, it is in the spirit that the factors responsible for imbalance need to be treated. The mediumistic meetings that are held are of the most and highest importance, as all activities at the Spiritist Center are. But even more importantly is that we, on a day-to-day basis, whether we are workers at a Spiritist Center, whether we just attend a Spiritist Center, or whether we are part of the mediumistic team, because we are not just a medium for those few hours that we find ourselves during the week at the Spiritist Center. Because spirits, especially those that don't want to see the work done, those who want to bring us down because we brought them down in previous existences, they will wait in the shadows, waiting for the opportunity. But they will observe us and even take notes on how we're behaving, sometimes reporting back, depending upon the organizations. It's very in-depth. Even in this book, you can learn about the complexities of what happens in the behind the scenes. So let's be aware that we are always a medium. So in our day-to-day lives, when we're at work, when we're interacting with our mailman, our neighbor, our significant other, our family members, who, by the way, are the family is the cell of society. We need to be able to find peace within ourselves and understanding and love for our family, as well as for those who are outside. It is so important for us to understand how we, the immortal spirit, the role that we ourselves, the responsibility, and dare we say, the power that we have in our own, on our steps towards well-being. You might not have thought about this before, but mediumship and mental health and well-being plays a huge role. And this book, if we may say, amongst many other books within the Spiritist literature, reaffirms this. And that's why we're reminded, as we shared earlier, from Emmanuel in the book Seara dos Médiuns. Remember SIRS, service. Let's go back. Service, improvement, rescue, solution. We are being of service. We are offering a service. We are improving ourselves by being mediums, by assisting these spirits, whether it's during the mediumistic meeting or during our hours of sleep. Because yes, by the way, if you didn't know, mediumistic meetings happen in the spirit realm. They can happen while we're asleep, while we are disengaged from our physical body. Yes, it happens still. So before you, as a sidebar, before you go to bed at night, because the only thing that needs sleep is your body. We, the immortal spirit, soul, we don't need rest, per se. So let's ask before you go to sleep, to be of service, to serve as a vehicle, as a good medium on the other side during your hours of physical sleep. But let us always keep in mind that everything stems within us, the immortal spirit. And mediumistic meetings and learning about mediumship is monumental in this process of our evolution and us finding healing and well-being. And something that Jesus said that really kind of drives this idea home, and he said in Matthew 6:21, "For where your treasure is, there your heart be also." We can say this in a different way. We can call this what is our central desire. Wherever our central desire, where our heart, our mind, all of our intention is, that is what drives us. And our central desire is also what the spirits, especially the spirits that are less evolved, because we want to use more compassionate words, they are aware of this technique. And they're aware that each human being, each person, each soul has something called a central desire within us. That's the driving force that we deep down within inside of us, something that we truly desire, and they can use that against us. So it begs the question, what is your central desire? What is mine? Because if I'm not aware of it, but it's just driving me, how can I say that I'm in control of my life? I'm at the mercy of my subconscious and the spirits around me. And it's highly likely that we were not saints in a previous life, that we could probably say with some certainty that we're going to have a good number, maybe one or two people from the past that haven't let go yet, those souls that linger and somehow find us. So it's important for us to really start to get to know ourselves, to be able to be the best medium we can be. And mediumship is relevant. It was relevant 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago until today. And we know that morality does not change independent of the time or century that we're in, because good is always good and bad is always not good. But did you know how modern mediumship is? In the Medium's book, they talk about human telegraphy. And they ask the spirits, can two persons evoking each other simultaneously transmit their thought and communicate? The spirits answer, yes. And this human telegraphy will someday be a universal means of communication. I can simultaneously transmit my thoughts and communicate. Then it's asked, why can't it be practiced at present? It already is by some, but not by many. Men and women must purify themselves, more so that their spirit is freer of matter. A further reason why evocation must be made in God's name. Until then, it will be restricted to pure souls and to those who are dematerialized, something that is quite rare in the current state of Earth's inhabitants. This is what we might refer to as the soul phone. Yes, that's right, folks. That's what's coming next. That's what's in store for us. The more we evolve, we become this soul phone, no longer the iPhone. Because the iPhone is physical and it's still very much attached to this idea of ego. It's, attached to matter. But once we begin to dematerialize, spiritualize ourselves, we become a soul phone. It might sound comical, we know, but it really isn't. This is a real thing. This is a real thing that exists, and in rare occasions, as they state here, happens. Interesting, right? You can read more about it in the Medium's book. We hope this piqued your interest. You can go and read more about it and enlighten yourself. So let's keep our mind to the future. Let's look ahead, because looking ahead, we're reminded of all the great things that are in store for us. And in the Medium's book, they remind us, don't think that mediumship is given only to correct one or two individuals. Rather, the objective is greater. It is meant for all humankind. As individuals, mediums are very unimportant instruments. Thus, when we provide instructions of general interest, we utilize mediums who offer us the required abilities, but you can be very sure that the time will come when good mediums will be quite common, and good spirits will no longer have to use faulty instruments. We are evolving, and there will come a time when this will come to pass. And it's good for us to look to the possibilities of the future, the positives, and set goals for ourselves and be reminded of what our purpose is and what is driving us. And ultimately, start making the changes today. Don't wait for Monday or next week or next year. In the book Times of Health and Conscientiousness by Joanna DeAngelis, a book that we are currently doing a study on at our Spiritist Center, the Spirit Society of Baltimore, a fantastic book. And she gives us some reminders. And she says, Joanna says, it is imperative that you get positively involved with the divine plans. So beckons the question for us to ask ourselves, am I involved with the divine plan? Am I connected to the divine plan? And that can look like saying a prayer to your mentor, your guide, asking to be connected to your divine plan, to be able to fulfill your reincarnatory plan. Otherwise, we become stagnant. And Joanna reminds us, if you would rather suffer, you're free to do so until you finally opt for well-being. So we can stay in this darkness, in this illness, if we choose to. But we also can, the opposite can happen. If we work on ourselves and we choose happiness, we can begin to repair, find healing. So she says, do not make mountains out of molehills. Acknowledge what is, acknowledge the bad that has already happened, that we may have done, but let's look forward to make better decisions, because we can't go back to what has already happened in the past. We can't change the past, but we can for sure change what we do today so our tomorrow is even better. Because our destiny is not to suffer. Our destiny is happiness. Our destiny is joy. Our destiny is love. Our destiny is peace. Imagine feeling that peace in your heart on a daily basis. You might not feel it right now. You might feel overwhelmed. You might feel lost. You might feel like you don't have a purpose, or that everything is just so overwhelming, or that life is losing its meaning for you. But this is the time when you find yourself amidst this darkness that we must look up. We must look up to the stars to remind us of the infinite, of the grandiosity that what God has created, but also to look within and to remind ourselves that it's temporary. This too shall pass. And it's time to roll up our sleeves and start doing the work on ourselves. As they say, there's no time like the present. And Joanna reminds us, suffering is always the result of a negative action, never the cause. So there is a cause from the past. If we can't find it today, It's in the past somewhere. We don't need to know what it was. We just need to know that today we can start to change. We can ask for forgiveness, but also learn to forgive ourselves for what has already happened, to put ourselves in a vibratory level so our spirit guide can assist us. You know, nowadays personal trainers are super expensive. Thousands of dollars we're talking about. But we have our own personal trainer that God has given to us since birth, and that is our spirit guide. And we don't say that to be comical. We say that to be real. Utilize them. Utilize your guide. They are there specifically. That is their role, is to assist you. It's a blessing from God. Mediumship is a blessing from God. To be able to have the influence of spirits is a blessing from God, because it reminds us that we are not alone. In what seems like an infinite darkness, we are not alone. So some take-home reminders for today as we come to a closing of our talk. Joanna reminds us, without a guilty conscience, sentimentality, or coercion, make an honest evaluation of your life and awaken to what you should produce that is good, useful, and constructive, fully invested in your happiness. How much of what we are doing on a day-to-day basis is put towards working on ourselves? You know, there's a phrase that, tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are. Well, tell me what you do the most of and I'll tell you who you are. What are you most engaged in? What do you make a priority? We all only ever have 24 hours in a day. Nikola Tesla only had 24 hours in a day. Elon Musk only has 24 hours in a day. Everyone else only has 24 hours in a day. Let's make the best use of our time. And when we need it, use it as often as possible. Prayer, it is our spiritual CPR, because we are promised in the Spirit's book that when we pray, we are given courage, patience, and resignation. So don't forget to utilize it every day, not just to help protect us from negativity, but let us also give thanks for all the negative things that haven't happened as well. And gratitude is a huge thing. We've given talks about that before, and you can read Joanna DeAngelis' book, The Psychology of Gratitude, and how important that is in our the role that it plays in our day-to-day lives. And that helps us keep our vibration at a higher level. When we pray, it's that dial turning to the higher vibration to help us. And there's no model of prayer that we have to use. It's as simple as turning your heart, your mind, your soul to God and just saying, I need guidance. I need help. Please help me. It's as simple as that. And in the Medium's book, they say the following: in many circumstances, our protector spirits, our spirit guide, can point out the best path for us to follow, but without leading us to it. Otherwise, we would lose all initiative and wouldn't do anything without resorting to them, which would be harmful to our evolution. In order to progress, humans must continually acquire experiences at their own expense. So we will continue to have free will, but praying and attuning our minds allows us to be assisted. Tips on being a good medium before we say goodbye for this wonderful talk. In this book, Leaving Spring, Emmanuel tells us education. Educate ourselves through reading, lectures. We can use YouTube, Audible app, Incite Timer app. The practice of simple goodness. Something as easy as posting positive things on social media, sending messages to friends. If we want to be a good medium, but we can't be an actual medium in a medium center, be a good medium in your day-to-day life. Share positivity with others. Send your friend a nice text or a nice email. And years ago, decades ago, we would send letters. Now we send emails and texts. Sharing consoling and constructive books so it can inspire other people. Practice of meditation and prayer. Joanna talks a lot about this in a lot of her literature. Yoga exercises are just a few of the extra things that we threw in here as well that also has been proven to help us to maintain our balance. Especially now we have the ability to do these things at home. Don't have to be in a crowded place. Even now things are beginning to open up again. All these things we can do from home and on YouTube, and it's free of charge. Ways that we can be the best version of ourselves, which will enable us to be the best medium we can be. And don't forget, connecting with nature. Joanna Deanne just talks a lot about this in Happy Life and in many of her books, and many other books as well. We can connect with the energy of nature, that positive energy that can renew us and restore us. These are just some tips, some final things. And always remember to stay vigilant. And in modern terms, our youngsters, our youth might refer to it as staying woke. Be aware. That's why it's important for us to read, to educate ourselves, to know what's going on with ourselves, to know who we are, to learn how to control that dial in our everyday lives. So we thank you so much for everyone for enabling us to be here today, for participating. And should you have any questions, please feel free to share them in the chat box, or you also can email the United States Spiritist Federation as well. But thank you all so much.
Thank you, Kirsten, for this amazing presentation. These are great teachings and reminders on how to be a medium today, right? The responsibility, compassion to love ourselves and love one another, and what is our central desire. And why not to remind ourselves that years ago you introduced the CPR acronym, right? The courage, patience, and resignation. And today you introduced another one, which is SERVES. Service, improvement, and rescue and solution. So thank you for these enlightening words and bringing to us the reminders that we are all mediums and we can do the best out of it, even though we're going through our struggles, and we have one another. So thank you for the comforting words. We would like to take a break at this time so we can grab a drink or perhaps stretch a little bit before we continue to our event here. But do not disconnect, because we would like to go over some announcements as well that you will find very interesting before we go into the next segment. I would like to just go over a couple things with you. And we're good here. Yep. If you are looking for some books on Spiritism, please check out the website on the United States Spiritist Federation bookstore, www.spiritistbooks.usa. Browse it and get your books today. There are always some new arrivals, and books are in English and some in Portuguese, plus Spiritist magazines and books for children as well. Just in time for this great celebration of the 106th year of anniversary of the Medium's book, the United States Spiritist Federation announces the release of the Medium's book to be coming soon. It will be available in the United States Spiritist Federation bookstore at the website again, www.spiritistbooks.usa. And we would like to also to remind everyone that every year during the U.S. Spiritist Symposium, we get to learn more about the U.S. Spiritist Medical Association. For those who are not familiar with the SMA, its mission is to support spiritual care as a complementary therapy to the conventional approach in clinical practice. To learn more, please visit the SMA website at www.sma/us.org. SMA is announcing their second virtual congress that will take place on November 20th and 21st of this year. This event will be broadcasted in 5 languages: English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, and German. Save the date and spread the news. Please follow the event announcement at their website as well and on Facebook. Check out also the website for FYCESE, that stands for Family, Youth, and Children Spiritist Education. This is a relative new department within the United States Spiritist Federation. Browse the website for more information. See how Spiritist groups all over the U.S. are collaborating to provide more resources that focus on the unique needs of teaching Spiritism to children, youth, and families, plus skills needed to understand and apply the principle of Spiritism to our family life. This is for educators, for parents, and for the kids. Get information on youth events, share with your groups, and interact with the United States Spirit Federation by asking questions and sending your comments. What a great work. And talking about family, youth, and children, not to mention all the kids from age 0 to 99, all of us, please do not miss this great event next month on July 10th and July 11th. This will be the 18th year of the Family Spiritist Retreat organized by the Tri-State Spirit Federation in collaboration with the United States Spiritist Federation. Last year, it was all virtual, but this year we will have the opportunity of participating both virtually and in person. But here's what is new. The invitation to do in-person activities outdoors has been extended to different Spiritist groups in many different states. See more details on the website. Little by little, we are resuming this fraternal contact in person. Register now. You have to register as immediately as possible, and it's free. Make sure that you do so. And now let's watch a video inviting us to this event. And dear friend, in a partnership with the International Spiritist Council, the Spirit Society of Carolinas has made available the Spirit book and now is releasing the Medium's book in audiobooks, all for free. Go to the YouTube channel or website of the the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, or the Spirit Society of the Carolinas, and use your time in a very useful way learning about the Spiritism. Just as Kirsten had reminded us, right? There are many ways for us to learn about Spiritism and about ourselves as well. Due to the long period of time it takes to organize a big event like the Worldwide Spiritist Congress, there has been a change of plans for 2022. Its virtual debut will be on October 15th and 16th, 2022, and it will be organized by the Unispirited Francois at Francophonique in collaboration with the International Spiritist Council. For more information, please follow the updates at www.10sem.com. That is CEM.com. And join us every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to watch the talk series that is organized by the United States Spiritist Federation with special guests from many states within the United States and different countries who talk about different themes on Spiritism. These talks are in English, and you can watch at the Facebook page or the YouTube channel of the United States Spiritist Federation. Participate, ask questions, send your comments, and an interactive way to learn more about Spiritism. And in the past 5 years, the United States Spirits Federation has published more than 30 spirits books in English. There's a lot more to do, and the resources got scarce during these difficult times. But you, as an individual or your Spiritist center, can make a difference as well and help in the dissemination of Spiritism in English. Use the QR code right now on the screen and send your donation for the publication of this series of 6 books by Teresinha de Oliveira and other titles as well. Be part of a solution for all of us as we give continuation to this work. And to wrap up this part, follow the United States Spiritist Federation on social media as well and get the information you need to learn about the events organized by the United States Spirit Federation. You can follow us in many ways if you want to be informed about all that is going on. And please make sure that you subscribe at our website at www.spiritist.us. I would like to thank of you for your time, and we would like to go back now to our next segment in this amazing moment that we are right now together, right? We would like to welcome all of you, and you can we can continue to work together throughout these different segments. We'll continue our 15th Spiritism Symposium with this new module that is entitled Ask Me Spiritism, Ask Me Anything. That is, we're gonna create a new acronym here called AMA, and it's important to remind ourselves that this is something that we were asked to do it again because it was a success on previous events as well. We want to remind everyone that the questions that you can pose here, that you can ask, it's not only about mediums or mediumship, but anything about Spiritism. So please prepare your question, ask your questions, whichever way you're following us. And I would like to formally introduce our dear friend, Eduardo Christie, the moderator of this panel. Eduardo Christie has been involved with Spiritism for more than 20 years and is an active member of the Inner Enlightenment Spiritist Society. Edward is a classically trained pianist, has taught music in New York City, that is, as well as computer science courses at the NYU. He enjoys learning and uses his love of teaching to share what he has learned with others as well. Also, we will have 4 speakers in this panel taking part with Edward Christie: Dr. Sonia Doi, Eduardo Haddad, Peter Hayes, and Joao Korngold. I will be introducing all of them before I pass the word to Edward. Dr. Sonia Doi is currently occupying the position of president of the Allan Kardec Spirit Society of Maryland, U.S. Spiritist Medical Association, and International Spiritist Medical Association. Graduated in medicine by the University of São Paulo, Brazil, with specialization in endocrinology. Dr. Doi has over 25 years of research experience in the U.S. And then we introduce Mr. Eduardo Haddad, who is one of the founders and currently a board member of the Sunrise Spiritist Society of Texas in Houston. Mr. Haddad was formerly the treasurer of the Spiritist Federation of Florida and the United States Spiritist Federation. He has worked as a speaker and lecturer. Professionally, Mr. Haddad occupies an executive finance position in the technology industry. Peter Hayes is the president of Spiritist group Love and Light in New York, New Jersey. He has done lectures on Spiritism all over the U.S. Besides doing over 60 episodes of the radio program Living Spring on Kardec Radio, he was on the editing staff for the Spiritist book by the U.S. Spiritist Federation. Peter has published several children's books with his wife, Betty Rosen, through their company, Sem Fronteiras Press, plus other publishers too. And then finally, we have Joao Korngold, who is one of the founders and directors of the Spiritist Group of New York and the Spiritist Alliance for Books, SAB, that promotes and disseminates Spiritism in English. He has been one of the directors of the Mediumship meeting for the past 18 years. He is also responsible for the study groups, and he gives talks on Spiritism in Portuguese and English. Joao Korngold is an engineer, and professionally, he works as a banker. Well, Mr. Edward, the virtual floor is all yours, and good luck with everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonardo, for that introduction to this great panel. I'd like to welcome you to this segment, as you mentioned, called Ask Me Anything. It's a question and answer format, unlike the usual question and answer formats that occur during the symposium, because it has a special characteristic. The panelists will answer any question you have about Spiritism, not just those that relate to mediums and mediumship. So if you have a question, any question about Spiritism, and would like clarification on a subject, please submit your questions to Facebook and YouTube. This event generates a lot of questions, more than we usually have time to answer, but we'll attempt to get as many of your questions answered as we can. Well, Sonia, welcome. Nice to see you. The first question is yours. You know, one of the reasons people turn to Spiritism is that, like all religions, it gives meaning and purpose to life by providing explanations for events that are difficult to understand. How does Spiritism give us hope to understand the pandemic and so many other difficulties that we as a society are going through?
First of all, it's an honor to be in this panel, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you sharing with us this event. In the Spirits book, question 740, the Spirits respond to Kardec that calamities are trials that give us the opportunity to develop our intelligence, to develop patience and resignation towards God's will. And at the same time, it helps us to develop sentiments of compassion, sentiments of fraternity and love to our brothers and sisters. And we have seen this development of fraternity, of compassion through this pandemic. But let's get back to the question, how does Spiritism give us hope to go through these afflictions? First of all, Spiritism helps us to understand the reason and the purpose of these afflictions. So the Spirits tell us that calamities are needed to push humanity out of stagnation into a path of progression for happiness and perfection. So, studying Spiritism, we understand also that suffering in one incarnation is infamous comparing to the infinite life of the spirit of spiritual life. As Kirsten posted, this also shall pass. This will pass. So the tribulations, we also have to remember that the tribulations that we endure in during one incarnation are part of the atonement that we planned for ourselves before we incarnated, so we can heal our soul. But one may ask, what hopes Spiritism brings to those who lost a loved one for COVID. And Spiritism teaches us that we don't lose anyone, that the discarnated spirit is well alive in another dimension, and that one day we will all meet again. We also learn that nobody dies, nobody goes before his or her time. In fact, in chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, Blessed are the Afflicted, the Spirit Sanson tell us that what we see as disgrace is many times a release for the discarnate spirit who no longer needs to remain suffering in this physical realm. So suffering and difficulties, if confronted with courage and resignation, are remedies for the infirmities of our soul. And I'd like to close by saying that looking forward, we see a much brighter future for humanity. And if we remember that we will reincarnate again, imagine how much better the world will be then. So those are the hopes that I think Spiritism brings to us.
Thank you, Sonia, for your heartwarming message. We really need this kind of consolation at this time with so much happening in the world and so many changes, as you point out. So thank you again for your response. Eduardo, welcome from Texas.
Hey.
Well, and I'm in Brooklyn all the way here. Anyway, a question for you. A basic tenet of Spiritism is that we have multiple corporeal lives. What's the purpose of reincarnating? Couldn't we just evolve in the spirit world?
Hey, Edward, thank you very much. And again, it's a pleasure to be here and see all of you. Missing everybody, to see and hug everyone in person, hopefully soon. But while we are here, great question. So thanks for the question. Yeah, and it's a two-part question, right? So what's the purpose of reincarnating? And can we not evolve only as spirits in the spiritual world? Interesting, right? We wish we could. We read, right, the famous book from Chico Xavier, from André Luiz, No Solar, right, or Astral City, and we imagine, can we just not stay there, right? There's no pandemic there. There are no wars. There's no poverty. If I could only stay there, right, and not have to come back to Earth. So let's start by thinking about some of the things that Sonia just brought up, right, with the reincarnation. So reincarnation is one of the tenets of Spiritism, right? So it differentiates Spiritism from other spiritualists' beliefs, right, in that it's progressive. And we understand that reincarnation is what I would call the ultimate normalizer, right? It's the ultimate expression of God's justice. It's, in my view, the only philosophy or doctrine that explains the inequalities of our existence, right? It's only through reincarnation. So the purpose of reincarnating, right? According to the Spirit's book, it is a tool to help us reach perfection. We are all destined to be perfect spirits, pure spirits, and reincarnation is that mechanism, right? We learn, we study that some reincarnate to make amendments, right, to correct things, and some reincarnate as a mission. So, and we have multiple examples of both, and we can examine our own lives and ask which one is which for us. Also, reincarnation allows us to be a part of the creation, right? It requires us to contribute. All of us here are doing something, right? We are here today in this symposium, helping ourselves, helping others, spreading the word, and this is a manifestation of why we are incarnated. We are helping God's creation by participating. So, can't we not evolve as discarnate spirits, right? So we understand that when we are in what we call errant state, yes, we do evolve. We study, right? Again, I'm going to use No Solar as a great example for any of you who haven't yet read the book or watched the movie. I hope everyone has. You can see how much work it is in the spiritual life, right? If we so choose to, we have an opportunity to work, we have an opportunity to study. So we have an opportunity through our efforts to evolve, but we also know that it's only when we reincarnate that we can put those learnings to practice. Again, we come back to make amends, or we come back to be on a mission to, help a cause or advance some agenda in the incarnate world. So, in summary, we can't just stay in the spiritual life. At some point, by our own choice, we will ask to come back so that we can prove that we can practice what we have studied and understood during our in-between lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. You know, we all need a break from time to time, but as you point out, we're not here on vacation, as I heard it phrased once. We do have work to do, and the work is done, as you mentioned, in both realms. And it was enlightening for you to point out the various books that help us to understand about reincarnation. Thank you again. Peter, welcome. Nice to see you.
Hi, Edward. How are you?
So many systems of belief affirm the principle of future rewards and punishments, usually summed up in the idea of heaven and hell. Does Spiritism believe in heaven and hell?
Thank you for having me here. It is a pleasure to be part of this wonderful panel, and thank you for this question from the Federation. Heaven and hell are places that are a reflection of our state of being. And what Spiritism says about heaven and hell is that what we experience to be heaven or hell has to do with the level of the vibration of our spirit. The level of the vibration of our spirit has to do with our spiritual progress. So on the other side, if a spirit is experiencing hell, it usually is a reflection of its current state of being. The more spirits engage in working for the good and engage in self-knowledge and working on spiritual progress, the more the environment that a spirit might go through begins to change. So there's different levels of what we call hell. Another word used in Portuguese is umbral, the lower zones. But the same can also be, as a spirit progresses, that it goes to different levels of what we call heaven. These are not fixed places. So heaven, for instance, can be anywhere. Spiritism emphasizes that both heaven and hell, especially hell, is not a permanent state of being. If that were true, that would mean that God is vindictive, that we can never, ever work on our own progress, and we can never learn from our mistakes. We're going to be punished forever. But this is not what Spiritism is saying. Spiritism is saying that we go through the consequences of our actions, and whatever our actions are, we then have to experience some of the results of that on the other side. So what we call hell is, again, subject to our current state of being. And the more we deepen our awareness, the more we change the environment that we are in.
Thank you, Peter. I think one of the signature ideas of Spiritism is that we evolve, we change, and that's what you bring out, that this is not a permanent condition. Heaven and hell are not permanent conditions. Thank you for your answer. Very well put. Joao, bringing up the rear.
Hello.
Hi,
Last but not least.
Last but not least, no, for sure. The best for last. No, I won't say that. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. It's tempting to think that our thoughts are our own. Yet when we read or listen to someone talk, we see that we're affected by the thoughts of others too. According to Spiritism, how does spirits influence our everyday lives?
Thank you for the question. And, I think this question, it's very appropriate to the theme of this symposium, right? Because we're talking about mediums and mediumship. And, but we learned that we are all mediums, that we all interact with the spiritual world. And it should be that, right? Because like I learned at our study groups, if we cannot interact with the spiritual world, why should we have a guardian angel, a protecting spirit, if we cannot interact with that? So on question 459 of the Spirit's book, Kardec asks the spirits, do spirits influence our thoughts and actions? And the spirits respond, they often direct both. their influence is greater than you think, for very frequently is they who guide you. So they are present. They are around us all the time. How and to which ones do we connect depends on us, depends on our vibrations, depends on our necessity also, and our openness to listen to them. In the books of André Luiz, we learn a lot about the influence of spirits and the work that they do in our daily lives, our incarnated lives, and how we associate ourselves. I think Kirsten covered it so well in her brilliant lecture just before we came here. The necessity of us elevating our thoughts, of us trying to connect with the more evolved spirits, try to receive the influence of the spirits that can assist us. And also in the Spirits book, Kardec asks, how can we differentiate from our thoughts from the thoughts of the spirits are trying to impose on us? And the spirits says, it's when a thought is suggested, it's like you hear a voice. But that's not important, because we have freedom to make our own choices. So whenever we are vibrating in a positive level, whenever we have a good connection with the spiritual world, the spirits will assist us, will guide us, and we will be able to do better, to work on our evolution. Because in the end, what's important is our moral and intellectual evolution, and the spirits are there to assist us. It's on our part to open and listen to their help and their suggestion, and to follow the path that is more useful for us to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Joao. And you referred to the previous lecture, Kirsten's lecture, where she says, tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. And so what you were saying really resonates with that theme. Thank you. Okay, we have a question just posted. We often hear that spiritists are unequivocally pro-vaccine in general, and this latest one specifically. Is that true?
Thanks, Eduardo, or whoever sent that question. I will start by quoting Jesus when he said, "Give Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give God what belongs to God." Spiritism is not telling us what to do in specific cases. Spiritism brings us the moral teachings so that we can exercise our free will, as João just put it, to make our choices. And Spiritism, more than everything, help us to think, to use our intelligence, our intellect, our knowledge, and logic to make our choices. So if spiritists are more prone to be vaccinated, it might be just a coincidence, or it might be because their logic says so. But Spiritism is not here to tell you go and get vaccinated or not. We just Spiritism teaches to use logic and knowledge. Right. Hope I have answered.
Yes, thank you. It's often said Spiritism doesn't prescribe any particular behavior, and so your question stays very much in that spirit. Okay, Eduardo, this one's for you. Folks often ask me, what's the difference between the idea of purgatory and umbral? Aren't these entities the same with just different names?
Thank you, Edward, and thank you, Susanna, for the question. Very much. Good to see you here with us, Susanna. So a great question, actually. Now you take me back to my young years when I was studying at a Catholic school. Most of us came from the Catholic faith. I did. I spent a lot of time studying religion in the Catholic school. I was a very good student, by the way. I was very interested in religion in general. And just a fun fact that just came to my mind I have to share. At one point in a particular school whose name I'm not going to reveal, they brought in an ex-Spiritist to give a lecture to the students to prove that Spiritism was a hoax. So that is what I had to grow up with. So, and that confused the heck out of my head, believe me, at that point in time. I think I was 13 or 12. But coming back to the good question about purgatory and umbral, if memory still serves, I think there are a lot of similarities and there are differences. From a similarities perspective, you're right that as we learn in Catholicism, again, I'm going to use it because that's my reference for purgatory, that is a temporary place where souls will stay and get purified until they are ready to go to heaven, and then they will stay in heaven, right, for eternity. Umbral, if I understood well, and Peter just brought it up in his segment a second ago, is, and I'm going to use the same term, is a lower zone. We know from reading the Spiritist literature that it is not the lowest zone, is a lower zone than we are on Earth. There are lower and deeper zones, and it is a temporary place, right? We again, I'm going to use Nosolar again, and the fact that Andre Lewis spent, I believe, 8 years at the Umbral before he went to Nosolar. So there is a lot of similarities there when it comes to is a temporary place where, again, you gather your thoughts, you suffer in many cases. In the case of Umbral, we know there's a lot of suffering until we move on from the Umbral. We don't stay there forever. And in Purgatory, you don't stay there forever. So those are the similarities. Now, what is different? What is different is, again, in Purgatory, you go to heaven, and that is eternal. You stay there, right? That is the normal Christian belief. Spiritism is very different in which we know, again, we move on from Umbral, and we don't go to heaven. We don't become pure spirits either. We then recover and prepare for our next incarnation on Earth or wherever else we need to incarnate. So I think so. There are similarities for sure. I believe that a lot of the concepts that that's been revealed by Spiritism are not completely new, right? They've been inspired throughout time in different places, and those fragments of enlightenment, if you will, of clarity, kind of manifested themselves in different cultures, and you can see them certainly in the Catholic, belief, but they are so much better, in my humble opinion, explained and revealed through the Spiritist doctrine, through the higher spirits, right? They kind of distill it for us in a lot of details and put it within a system that makes sense to us. I hope I answered the question, Susanna.
Thank you, Edu. That was a great answer. Thank you. Peter, it's been said you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. How does self-knowledge help us in our spiritual growth?
Thank you for that question. It's a wonderful question because it's very basic. And it's also one of the fundamental points that Spiritism makes. We cannot have spiritual growth without self-knowledge, without consciousness. And the more that we learn through the experiences that we go through, which is one of the big reasons we're here, the more we learn, the more we develop awareness. And it may take a while, but the more we develop consciousness of ourselves, we begin to understand, for instance, some of our own negativity. Therefore, the more we understand our negativity, the more our negativity does not push us around. The more we have consciousness, the more we can work on reversing some of our patterns from the past. Therefore, Spiritism really embraces psychology, which is the pursuit of self-awareness. For instance, Kirsten's wonderful lecture mentions this subject in general, but she also made references to Joanna de Angelis. Another great book of Joanna de Angelis is the book Family Constellation, which fundamentally makes the point that healthy families make healthy societies. And all of the advice she gives in that book encourages self-awareness, self-knowledge, to think about the kind of relationships that we have with the people within our families. Now, when we think about self-knowledge, we can certainly explore our faults, but it goes the other way too. We can think about what is positive, what are our strengths, what sort of talents do we have. The more self-knowledge we have about that, the more we can start putting that to good use and trying to work for the good. And therefore, whether we're experiencing the repercussions of our faults, and of course we all do, or whether we're able to put into practice some of our better qualities, all of this is part of the journey that we go through in order to pursue spiritual progress. And none of that is possible without self-knowledge and without consciousness.
Thank you, Peter. I very much appreciate you bringing the balance between being on the lookout for things that we don't do so well, and also looking at the positive within us, because often there's a hypervigilance about towards the negativity, and there's so much goodness within us. There's so many gifts that each one of us has.
Yeah, requires
that certainly helps to in self-knowledge. So thank you for your answer. Joao, I understand that you want to make a comment about the vaccination question.
Yeah, it's just a quick comment. Yeah, it's just a quick comment on the vaccines question. It's just Spiritism teaches us to follow science, right? Spiritism tells us that if science proves us wrong, to stay with science. So I think in terms of vaccines and vaccination, we should follow science. Of course, we all have free will to make our choices, but we should basically follow science. That was it.
Thank you, Joao, for that clarification. So for you, your question, there are many opinions about the meanings of dreams, from Sigmund Freud's idea that they give us insight into the unconscious desires, to strictly neurological explanations that attribute them to brain activity. How does Spiritism explain dreams?
Yeah, well, the question can be a lecture on its own, right? So to answer quickly, I think it's important to understand first that in dreams, the part of dreams that make sense are the parts that we are experiencing the spiritual world. We detach ourselves from our physical bodies and we go and experience the spiritual world wherever our vibrational level takes us. Now, the part of the dreams that's very confusing and doesn't make any sense is our brain rehashing and readjusting the day, so we can discard it. But the part that makes sense, it's our experiences in the spiritual world. Now, in terms of our experiences in the spiritual world, I think it's important to separate what do we take from our dreams, because our brains are very well prepared to deal with our continuous thought process. So when we come back from our dreams to our physical bodies, we bring parts of what happened in the spiritual world, because we don't experience that with our physical body, and our brain fill the blanks with our own ideas. So we cannot 100% say that what we are remembering from our dreams is really what happened in the spiritual world. But in general terms, we should meaning I went there in the spiritual world. I met my father, my grandfather. I experienced a great lecture. But whenever we go down to the specifics, we should be careful, because maybe our brain is connecting dots that are not there. They are not our experiences in the spiritual world. So that's the basics of it on our dreams, but there is so much more for us to study. I suggest to read the books, like everybody's saying here, that we can learn so much more from the books. Thanks.
Thank you, Joao. I don't know how you managed it, but you you got to the heart of the issue, and of course, there's many details to be worked out. But certainly, there's a lot of power and wisdom in what you're saying. Thank you, Sonia. This one is for you. What's the role of mediums in the body of knowledge of Spiritism?
Can you repeat it again? What is the role of mediums in the body of knowledge of Spiritism? Okay, so mediums, we have to go through, as it was well said yesterday during the presentations yesterday and even today with Kirsten. Mediums have a high responsibility of education. We need to be constantly educating ourselves through Spiritism, and we need discipline. So that is I would say, a mandate to go and learn about ourselves, because that's what's going to help us to be a good medium. We need to understand ourselves first, to make whatever it is to become better every day, our efforts to become better every day, so that we can help others. So there's so much to be done as a medium and fulfill all the responsibilities that we have. So in the Medium's book, there is a lot about that. Kardec wrote a lot about the necessity of mediums to be educated, not specifically on the phenomena, but on the principles of Spiritism. And basically, that's what I would say.
Thank you. People still have lots of questions about mediums and mediumship, so thank you for your answer. I think, Eduardo, the next question is yours. Okay. Fernanda asks, if God created us, has a plan for us, and knows what's best for us, how effective are our prayers? That is, why should we pray?
That's right. It's a great question, and it's a question that also elicits other thoughts, like, should we even bother, right, to make any effort, right? And interesting, some debates around Spiritism have, I believe incorrectly, classified the Spiritists are being complacent because of this kind of thinking that we eventually we're going to evolve, right? Is one of the laws of progress, for example. We cannot be stagnant forever, so we'll be forced to evolve. So why should I bother, right? So that's a very profound question that I'm not going to try to answer right now. I think I'm just going to limit myself to say, we learn that God has created the laws, the moral laws, right? And we get to learn many of them through Spiritism. I think the last portion of the Spirit's book cover the moral laws, and we understand how they work. So I would say I wouldn't say that God has created a plan for each one of us. I would say that God has created a set of laws that guide how we exist. And many of them speak to the effort that we have to make, right, to modulate the speed at which we progress. So on the one hand, it is true that we are bound by the natural laws, right? The law of justice, charity, and love, the law of progress, the law of reproduction, the law of society, right? So all those laws that we learn about, and as we learn and as we study them, we learn that the more we operate in alignment with those laws, the better our experience is progressing, right? We suffer less, and chances are we move faster. So what is the role of prayer in all of this? The role of prayer is that unique opportunity that we have to express through our own efforts to connect with God and to exercise these laws in the sense of recognizing that there is a creator that created all of these laws, and that we need help, we need assistance, right? We cannot. Again, one of the laws is the laws of society that say that we cannot do what we are doing alone. We cannot progress by ourselves. It's a system that requires us to live together, right? To coexist. And therefore, part of that manifestation, in my view, is that by praying, again, we are making our contribution, our effort to connect with God and to basically recognize and to ask, right? To praise God's existence at the same time that we thank God for everything we have, and also ask for guidance, for light, for enlightenment, and that feeds our ability to understand these laws, right? So we are always surrounded. If we practice prayer as we learn from Christ and from the superior spirits, we learn how much assistance, right, we normally receive, that allows us to clear the roadblocks, see things with a clearer view, get strength, get energy, get confidence in our hearts that we are never alone, and then we can continue progressing.
Thank you, Eduardo. You point out something that is sometimes overlooked, that prayer is a two-way communication. And so it's not just us praying to God, it's also listening to the answers from either the God or good spirit. So thank you for pointing that out. The next question is for you, Peter, from Elaine. Umbral is a state of mind compared to purgatory, though thought to be a physical place, right?
Thank you, Elaine, for that question. Yes, umbral can be a state of mind, but that doesn't mean that in the spirit world there aren't places that feel like a state of umbral, meaning the lower zones. You could kind of use the word hell. I say that in quotes. There are places in the spirit world that reflect that, but the point is when we are in those places, it is because of what we're attracting. And what we're attracting is a reflection of our state of mind at that moment, the level of our spiritual progress. As we move out of umbral and into purgatory, purgatory is not necessarily a fixed physical place either, because none of the places in the spirit world are necessarily permanent. We pass from one to another. So it can be fixed up to a point, meaning that a place in the spirit world has to do with the level of our vibration, which I was mentioning before. And our level of vibration will keep us kind of like a balloon. in a particular place. And then when we change the level of our vibration, our balloon, as it were, as a metaphor for the spirit, moves up to another level. So these places in the spirit world are occupied by spirits that are, in a sense, connected through attraction at that moment. But it does not mean that it is a fixed place per se. Okay.
Thank you, Peter. We're getting a lot of questions about Purgatory Umbral today. They're really good questions. Thank you. And thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Joao, this one's for you from Sylvia. The majority of Spiritist centers in the United States are administrated by Brazilians. Do you think our kids will be the ones to continue this work?
Thanks, Sylvia. It's a very good question. We wish, right? But that's not what we should be really expecting on an individual basis. You'll see by the panel that we have right after this, that Spiritism is in good hands with this new generation, the youth generation that is coming after us. So what is important here is for us to do our work, to lay down the grounds for those that come after us to be prepared, to have the material, to have the information, to have the ability to continue our work. If this is going to be our kids or someone else's kids, we leave that to the spirituality. But I think that, if you look back and consider that the Spiritist movement in this country is very young, it's probably 30 years old or less. It started 100 years ago, but really started developing when the United States Spiritist Federation was founded in 1997. We came a long way. We are doing our work and we are preparing the youth generation. But, like Divaldo said, maybe it's not going to be them, it's going to be us coming back and in a new reincarnation and continue our work, right? So what we can do is do our part. We can share our experience with the youth. We can prepare them and allow them to make their own choices, to follow their own path, and not to have higher expectations on individual cases. Remember, Kardec didn't have any kids of his own, Kardec and Amélie. Chico Xavier didn't have any kids, and the work will continues. Divaldo has 3,000 kids, but that he called children, and I'm sure they will all continue the work. So as long as we do our part and we go back to the spiritual world with a clean conscience that we made the best that we could with the resources that we had, that should be enough, and the work will continue in other hands.
Thank you, Joao. It's clear that every generation has to grapple with these questions, and Spiritism offers such good, inspiring answers and gives us our life direction. So it will be picked up, perhaps not in the format, as you say, that we see it right now, but it will continue, I'm sure. Thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone who took time to submit questions, because this is the heart of the U.S. Spiritist Federation's mission, to help you answer the questions that mean so much to living a full and loving life. I also want to thank Sonia, Eduardo, Peter, and Joao for sharing their deep knowledge of Spiritism with us. We learned so much from each other, and your clear and concise replies bring light to our doubts. Of course, each of these questions can generate its own extended talk, and your answers have whetted our appetites to dig further into each question. Again, I thank all of you. I'd like to remind you also to visit the U.S. Spiritist Symposium website at spiritist.us. There you'll find books for purchase, resource materials, the location of Spiritist centers near you, and much more. I thank everyone for their participation in this event. Thank you, Leonardo.
Thank you, Edward.
Thank you.
All of
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we can see that, the reason why this segment is well-desired in our events, right? Great questions, great answers, and it's important to say that each one of these participants that we just had here, and Kirsten as well, they're not more enlightened than you and I, but they study Spiritism and participate in many Spiritist functions, right? Most importantly, as Kirsten also said, they are all spiritual beings in physical experience, and they are family members. They are members of our society, and through these means, right, all of these individuals, they are practicing what they learned. So thank you for your dedication, bettering yourselves, and bringing this amazing teachings to all of us. I would like to invite everyone to take another short break. And grab some refreshments and to stretch a little bit more. But please do not disconnect, as we will continue to share some important announcements to all of you. So give me one moment. We will be sharing some of these interesting announcements here as you stretch a little bit. First of all, I would like to cover with you that if you are looking for some Spiritist books, you can actually check the website of the United States Spiritist Federation bookstore, www.spiritistbooks.us. Browse it and get your books today. There are always some new arrivals, books in English and Portuguese as well, plus Spiritist magazine and books for children. We also would like to remind you that just in time for this great celebration of the 160 year or anniversary of the Medium's book, the United States Spirits Federation announces the release of the Medium's book to be coming soon. It will be available at the USSF bookstore through the website as well. And then we also like to remind everyone that every year during the U.S. Spiritist Symposium, we get to learn more about the U.S. Spiritist Medical Association. For those who are not familiar with the SMA, its mission is to support spiritual care as a complementary therapy to the conventional approach in clinical practice. To learn more, please visit the SMA website at www.sma/us.org. SMA is announcing their second virtual congress that will take place on November 20th and the 21st. This event will be broadcasted in 5 languages: English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, and German. Save the date and spread the news. Please follow the event announcements at their website or through Facebook as well. Check out this website for FYCSC, that stands for Family, Youth, and Children Spiritual Education. This is a relatively new department within the United States Spirits Federation. Browse the website for more information. See how Spiritist groups all over the U.S. are collaborating to provide more resources that focus on the unique needs of teaching Spiritism to children, youth, and families, plus the skills needed to understand and apply the principle of Spiritism to our family life. This is also for educators, parents, and for the kids too. Get information on youth events, share with your groups, and interact with the U.S. Spiritist Federation by asking questions and sending your comments too. And while we are speaking of family, youth, and children, not to mention all kids from age 0 to 99, all of us, please do not miss this great event next month on July the 10th and July the 11th. This will be the 18th year of the Family Spiritist Retreat organized by the Tri-State Spiritist Federation in collaboration with the United States Spiritist Federation. Last year, it was all virtual, but this year we will have the opportunity to participate both virtually and in person. But here's what's new. The invitation to do in-person activity outdoors has been extended to different Spiritist groups in many different states. So many different states will be partaking on this. See more details on the website. Little by little, we are resuming this fraternal contact in person. Make sure you register, and you do it immediately as well. It is free and it's fun. Check it out. And now let's watch a video inviting us to this amazing event. And in partnership with the International Spiritist Council, the Spirit Society of Carolinas has made available the Spirit's book and now is releasing the Medium's book in audio books as well. They're all for free. Go to the YouTube channel or websites of the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, or the Spirit Society of the Carolinas, and use your time in a very useful way learning about Spiritism and to answer many of the questions that we have about ourselves and our relation to the spirit realm. It is also due to long period of time that it takes to organize a big event like the Worldwide Spiritist Congress that there has been a change of plans for 2022. Its virtual debut will be on October 15th and 16th, 2022. And it will be organized by the Union Spiritist Francois at Francophonique, if I can say that correctly, in collaboration with the International Spiritist Council. For more information, please follow the update at www.10cem.com. And then finally, we would like to remind everyone that you can join us every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to watch the talk series that is organized by the United States Spiritist Federation, with special guests from many states within the U.S. and different countries who talk about different themes on Spiritism. These talks are in English. You can watch at the Facebook page or the YouTube channel of the United States Spirit Federation. Participate, ask questions, and send your comments as well, in an interactive way to learn more about Spiritism. And in the past 5 years, the United States Spiritist Federation has published more than 30 Spirits books in English. There is a lot of more to do so, and the resources got scarcer during these difficult times that we have been through. But you, as an individual or your Spiritist center, can make a difference in helping dissemination of Spiritist English books. Use this QR code right here on the screen, and you can send your donation for the publication of the series of 6 books by Terezinha de Oliveira and other titles as well. Be part of the solution. And then also, we ask you to follow the United States Spiritist Federation on social media and get all the information you need to learn about all the events organized by the United States Spiritist Federation. We have different ways to do so, and if you want to be informed, please connect with one of these options, and to obviously subscribing through our website as well, the www.spiritist.us. And at this moment, we would like to invite everyone to go back to our program. And I'm very excited, as I was excited for the last 2 segments that we had as well. But now it's all about youth time, right? Let us hear from our young minds and hearts about their experience with mediumship, their views on how mediumship has been brought up in the media. And is mediumship a subject that brings interest to the youth? Nothing better than to hear directly from them, right? First, let me introduce you, the moderator of the youth panel, and then I will also introduce each one of the representatives of the youth panel too. I would like to invite our dear friend Ligia Carvalho, who is the secretary and the coordinator of the Spiritist Education Department and bookstore for the Spiritist Center, Divine Light, in New Jersey, in Newark, New Jersey, which she co-founded and coordinates with a group of friends. Ligia is a member of the United States Spirit Federation, serving as their Family, Youth, and Children Spiritist Education Director, FYCSC. And representing the youth on this panel, we would like to introduce Mateus Pessanha, Leonardo Haddad, and Sara dos Santos. And I will introduce each one of them before I'll pass the word to Ligia. Starting with Mateus Pessanha, who is a junior at North County High School. He aspires to be an architect after high school graduation. Mateus plans to apply to a design school in the tri-state area. He is a second-generation Spiritist who has experienced the Spiritist movement in Brazil and the US. Mateus is currently involved in participating in the youth group at the Spirit Society of Baltimore in Maryland. Leonardo Haddad is an undergraduate student at the University of California in Irvine, pursuing degrees in psychology and philosophy. He is a Spiritist youth educator at Sunrise Spiritist Society of Texas. Leo has focused on presenting the Spiritist doctrine in a practical manner and integrating its teachings with a variety of relevant subjects. He is also the co-founder of the website The Mind Forum, a forum featuring articles discussing many intellectual subjects. And to conclude this panel, Sara dos Santos is a 19-year-old pre-nursing college student. She grew up in a Spiritist family and has been attending the Spirit Society of Baltimore, SSB, for over 10 years. Sara has given Spiritist presentations and participated in Spiritist youth activities both at the SSB and nationally. Sara is deeply connected to spirituality and sharing what she has learned thus far with all of us. And I would like to pass the word to our dear friend Ligia Carvalho to conduct this segment. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Leonardo. Thank you so much. I would like to express my gratitude for being here with these wonderful, wonderful young adults. I cannot express enough what a pleasure was working with them. So without further ado, we're going to move right on because our interest is really knowing what they have to share with us, pointers that they can give us. So I introduce to you, Mateus, who's going to lead off on this wonderful presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ligia, for the introduction. So in the beginning of our spiritual journey, we probably have asked ourselves this question: am I a medium? And the answer is a simple yes. And in the Book of Mediums, chapter 14, Kardec states that everyone who is in any degree influenced by spirits is, by the very fact, a medium. This faculty is inherent in man, and is therefore no exclusive privilege. In fact, there are few persons in whom some rudiments of medianimity are not found. We may therefore assume that everyone, or nearly everyone, is a medium. So here Kardec basically states that, in fact, everybody is a medium. Since everybody can feel the influence of spirits, so if I am a medium, then why can't I hear or see spirits? While Kardec states that everybody is a medium, he also states that, nevertheless, this qualification is only practically applicable to those in whom the medianimic faculty is clearly characterized by producing well-marked results, and this depends upon the greater or less degree of sensitivity of their organization. So he basically states that those who in fact can produce complex communication with disincarnate spirits are in fact true mediums, or we can also call them ostensive mediums. And before we go on to the presentation, I also have to remind that if anybody shows any sign of mediumship, always contact your Spiritist Center advisor. So it's not uncommon for us to be on our day-to-day routine and our mind suddenly adrift. We start to reflect on many trivial things, like, did I leave the door open? What am I going to have to dinner today? Or all these simple things. However, we also have meaningful thoughts. Sometimes we think, maybe I should have handled the situation better. Or we give ourselves a pat in the back and say, there was a right way to handle that situation. And then we start to think even more complex thoughts. Sometimes we even think that our minds are not our own anymore on this complex mental monologue. But what was a monologue is in fact a dialogue. It is known that spirits can influence us, but for the normal folk, or those who have a lower sensitivity, a spirit's influence feels like a random thought. So that complex thought that you had, that you even questioned if it was really yours, in fact, isn't. It might be from other spirits. So here we have a dialogue from an incarnate and a disincarnate spirit. And if we have a dialogue, then we have a way of communication. Therefore, we have a medium. So influences can be either negative or positive. We can identify whether we are having a positive or a negative influence by keeping track of our thoughts. So, if you're having a negative influence, you may feel depressive, sad, angry, rebellious, or any other of those negative feelings. If you're having a positive influence, however, you're going to have grateful, charitable, or truly good thoughts. However, influences not only decide our thoughts, but also vibrational, which is also one of the outcomes of our influences. So, in negative influences, our vibration is going to lower. And in positive influences, our vibration is going to skyrocket. And it's really important to know that because in lower vibrations, we may feel heavy, tired, and overall sad. And in extreme cases, our health may even begin to worsen. However, in higher vibrations, we're going to feel energetic, healthy, good, and at the same time, we're going to feel at peace with ourselves. So whenever we're talking about influence, we always talk about theories and stuff. However, we can also see some examples. So let's imagine you just came back home from a practice before or your important game, and in the practice you didn't do very good. You're thinking, why did coach put me in that position? Why am I here? Am I really worthy to be in my team? So you start to feel sad, and as you feel sad, you feel less energetic, and your vibration lowers. And as your vibration lowers, you're attracting bad company or less evolved spirits. And then they're gonna begin to bombard you with bad thoughts and bad influences. So you just spiral down in the path of sadness and depression. And if that condition, even if you don't put yourself out of that condition, you may actually begin to feel even more depressive, and the obsession process may begin to set in. However, let's look into the example of the positive influence. So you just came back from work, and you start to wash your dishes and clean your kitchen. You're gonna keep your house a very clean and nice environment, which actually puts your vibration into a higher state, because you're making sure you live in a healthy environment. So as you're keeping your kitchen clean and doing your chores, you begin to think, man, I'm grateful for my job. I handle it right. I am grateful for everything that's happening with me. And you suddenly begin to feel really happy and at peace with yourself. And your mind starts to work even more. And you think, maybe tomorrow I should do even better. And your mind begins to work so much, and you're having so many constructive thoughts that you begin to wonder, is this really me who is in control of my mind right now, or is it someone else? And in fact, you might be having a dialogue with maybe your mentor or any other higher spirits. And you start to feel even better, and this is what we should strive for. So in the end, while influences do not define us, they can truly steer us down a path, good or bad. Therefore, we need to watch and pray. We always need to watch our thoughts, whether they're good or bad. If we're having bad thoughts, we need to watch them so we can have even better thoughts. And if we're having good thoughts, we need to watch them because we can probably learn something from them. And we also need to pray. We need to pray that those negative influences stay away from us. That we can, if we find ourselves in a negative influence, we can rise above that. And if we're having good influences, we need to pray that we keep those informations with ourselves, and that we have even more. And that we also need to be grateful, because charity and because being charitable and expressing gratefulness is actually the best way that we can evolve. Thank you all for your attention.
Oh, you're on mute, Ligia.
I was just saying thank you to Mateus, and we're going to follow up with Leo. So thank you so much. Welcome back, Leo. Please go ahead.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. First of all, thank you, Mateus, for that wonderful presentation. And I see my presentation as a bit of a follow-up and maybe an expansion on some of the ideas that Mateus discussed. And so my presentation is how spiritual influence affects happiness and suffering. So I'll be focusing on the spiritual influence itself, that side of mediumship, right? And how that plays out in our daily lives, and how we can most optimally deal with the influence of spirits. Because I'm going to reiterate what Mateus was talking about, the influence of spirits is very real and inevitable as well. So, might as well learn how to deal with it, in the most productive and best way possible. So, as a reiteration, as Kardec states, we all have the ability of mediumship to some degree, and the greater the mediumship ability, the greater the influence spirits have on our daily lives. None, however, are exempt from the spirit's influence. And just to establish here from the Spirit's book, the influence of spirits, question 459 asks, do spirits influence our thoughts and our actions? And the answer, which is quite surprising, at least it was to me when I first learned it, is that their influence upon them is greater than you suppose, for it is very often they who direct both. So the answer here that the spirits gave us is that our thoughts and our actions are influenced by the spirits, and it's often them who direct our thoughts and actions. So that's kind of a scary thing to think about. Mateus was talking about the inner dialogue. And if we're talking about, if there's a hierarchy of power, there might be instances where the spirits actually have a stronger grip on your own thoughts than you do. And so this is why, it's so important for us to understand this and have this knowledge so that we can, be masters in our own house, so to speak. So I want to discuss the two aspects of the influence, right? The positive and the negative. And I'm going to do that by using two questions from the Spirit's book. The first one is a demonstration of the positive influence of spirits. So from question 462, Kardec asks, do men of intelligence and genius always draw their ideas from their own minds? The answer is, their ideas sometimes come from their own spirit, but they are often suggested to them by other spirits who judge them to be capable of understanding them and worthy of transmitting them. When they do not find the required ideas in themselves, they make an unconscious appeal for inspiration, a sort of evocation that they make without being aware of what they are doing. So I found this to be quite astounding and almost beautiful. I mean, I think it's beautiful because, the greatest ideas that we have had on this earth, right, from our brightest men and women, have, in all likelihood, come from the higher spirits, because they our great intuitions and unconscious ideas, they, as the answer tells us here, they often come from not ourselves, but from the higher spirits who deem us worthy, right, and capable of transmitting these ideas. And this is the beautiful and good side of the influence, right? Because who doesn't want to be blessed with great ideas and with ideas and feelings that will bring us closer to a higher vibration, right, to God. And so being open to those influences is very important. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to be open to those. But before that, let's also discuss the negative side of the influence. So, and this question and answer will contain two ideas that I want to discuss. First, the negative influence, and second, what is the nature of that influence and how much does it have to do with who we are, right? So the question asks, question 467, can we free ourselves from the influence of the spirits who incite us to evil? So it's already a given in this question that spirits do incite us to evil, right? And the answer is yes, for they only attach themselves to those who attract them by the evil nature of their thoughts and desires. So also given in the question is that, well, I guess Kardec asked, can we free ourselves, right? Although with the implication that, hopefully we can free ourselves, and the answer is yes. Spirits can only influence you if you are susceptible to their influence, and that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. And I'm just going to read this little section of text that I wrote out here that expands upon that idea. Negative influences can only reach us if we allow them to, and so by being aware of the quality of our thoughts and feelings and aiming at goodness in God, we may protect ourselves from negative influences and open ourselves up to positive influences. So, as Mateus was talking about, right, he describes a scenario where your vibration is getting lower and lower, right? When we start feeding our emotions of anger and hatred and jealousy, and we start letting our thoughts take this path, right? That is how we open ourselves up to negative influences, right? Stronger, and the more you feed it, the stronger it gets. But you have the last say in whether or not you allow that to happen, right? Because as the answer says here, only those whose thoughts and desires have an evil nature can be influenced. So if you allow yourself to have those evil thoughts and desires, right, and continuously feed them, then you are opening yourself up, and then the negative influence will certainly reach you. But as I wrote here in the text, and which is backed up by what the spirits tell us, if you want to do the opposite of that, right? If you want to make yourself, immune, I guess I would say, to the negative influence, to put yourself in a vibration where the negative influences cannot reach you, then you need to be vigilant of your thoughts, and you need to be aware of the quality of your thoughts and feelings, and continuously aim at the good. So, and I'm going to get into a little more details as to scenarios and how to do that. So let's just save that for a little, I guess, for this discussion right now. So, we've established the influence of the spirits on us, and I want to talk a little bit about potentially how to control that. And we discussed a little bit on how to do that, but I want to get a little more specific. So here are 4 ideas, I would say, that I came across, I guess, and thought of, or I guess was inspired to think of while contemplating, how can we establish a little more control over this influence? Because I don't think anybody wants to be just at the whim of spirits, and we all have free will, as the book teaches us, and as Spiritism teaches us. And so it's our duty actually to establish some control over the influence. So the 4 ideas that I'm going to discuss briefly are locus of control, feedback loops, awareness and acceptance of emotions, and acceptance of the struggle of life, with an emphasis on humility and gratitude. And I believe discussion of these ideas will help us to understand how the influence of spirits works, and potentially also how to establish some control, to gain some control over that influence and over ourselves, right? Over our feelings and emotions, and not to just be carried away by our feelings and emotions, which is what happens if you just respond passively to especially negative feelings. And by the way, there's going to be an emphasis on the negative because, I think it's more self-evident what you're supposed to do when you are when you feel the positive emotions, right? You feed off of them, you nourish them, right? Continue to you try to stay on that vibration of love and all of the things that bring us closer to God and the higher spirits. But I think we are more afflicted by the negative, right? And at the stage that we are, we want to learn how to deal with the negative. And I think that's more salient, unfortunately, than it is the positive. Although dealing with the negative does give way to the positive. So, it's kind of what's it called? Killing two birds with one stone, I guess you could say. So the idea of locus of control. The locus of control is a concept which describes whether individuals believe control over their lives is within or outside of them. And so this is a very simple idea, but it's basically, there are people who think that they have the power to decide, right, whether they're going to succeed or fail. And there's people who believe that basically their environment determines whether they will succeed or fail. And even though we know that the environment and the spiritual influence, which would be part of the environment, plays a strong role in determining our influences, right, and what we're thinking and feeling, it's still within our power. As the question, I think 462 told us, it's ultimately up to us. And so fostering an internal, so the two, by the way, locus of control is an idea that comes from psychology, and the two locuses of control are internal and external. Someone who has an internal locus of control believes that the control is within them to do and to achieve, whereas someone with an external believes that basically the control of their lives is outside of them. And interestingly, from the psychological studies, people with an internal locus of control report higher levels of well-being, happiness, and even higher socioeconomic status. And so life is more favorable if you believe that you ultimately have control of where things are going. And so, psychology tells us that, Spiritism tells us that. And so I believe that this is a very important idea to consider. And I put a little asterisk here that says teen years are when we begin making important choices and our free will is developed. So this is very important, right? Because we're discussing the youth's take on mediumship. And I think that the teenage years are when our locus of control begins developing the strongest, because, that's when we know from Spiritism that's when we become more spiritually mature, right? It's almost like our spirit settles into, the reincarnation cycle is completed, I guess, after childhood, right? Because when the individual is still a child, there's still a lot of settling in happening, and that's described more in other Spiritist books. And so the teenage years, I think, are extremely important. So especially for making decisions, and locus of control is very important when you're contemplating your own free will, contemplating decisions. It's good to foster the idea that it is within your control and that your actions have consequences, both negative and positive, and ultimately you're the one steering, although there are influences, but you get to decide whether those influences are going to, you're going to let those influences have any power over you. So I think that's enough for the first concept. The second concept is feedback loops. And when Mateus was describing a day where it's like a series of unfortunate events, things keep getting worse and worse, maybe. And that's sort of the idea of a feedback loop. So I'm going to read here. The negative feeds the negative, just as the positive feeds the positive. It is important to pay attention when your thoughts and emotions begin to take a negative turn and to stop the cycle. Left to themselves, these negative thoughts and emotions grow, and so does the intensity of the influence from the spirits that wish to keep the cycle unbroken and to harm you. So, the idea of a feedback loop is quite straightforward. It's that, especially in terms of our thoughts and emotions, the negative feeds the negative and the positive feeds the positive. And it's interesting because these feedback loops, I'm sure that we've all experienced this. It's not the same as just one bad thing after another bad thing. It's almost like or one good thing after the other good thing. The more that, say, bad things happen, the more the negativity sort of becomes this closed system where you can't really see the outside. You can no longer compare the negative with the positive. It just seems like everything is negative, right? And I'm sure that people with like a major depressive disorder would be able to attest to this the most, where you just look around and all you see is the negative, right? And that's when a feedback loop has an extremely powerful hold on you. And so that's why it's especially important right at the beginning of that feedback loop, when you notice, hey, the past 5 thoughts I've had have all been very negative. I've been very critical about everything and just putting people and myself down in my thoughts and feelings. And just once you become aware, that's your cue to establish some control over that situation, to say, hey, you know what? I can turn this around. And it's going to take effort, because the interesting thing about negative emotions is that they like to be alive, right? When you're angry, you want nothing else but to be angry, right? It's almost like, I wouldn't say we get joy out of it, but feelings want to continue themselves, I would say. And so same with positive, right? When you're feeling really good, you have that feeling of like, I don't want this to ever end. And interestingly enough, it's kind of the same thing with negative emotions. So you have to use your free will to establish some control and say, no, I do not want to be carried away by these negative feelings and thoughts. And that is the act of breaking a feedback loop. And so this little asterisk that I have down here says, you are especially susceptible to negative influence when you are vulnerable and weak. However, this is also when your calls for assistance from higher spirits will be the most fervent. So I'm talking about when you've hit rock bottom, essentially, right? Like when you're in a very, very negative situation, you feel extremely weak. You feel like you're being overpowered, right? Obviously, the spirits who want to do you harm, this will be, if you feel like that, it's probably because they are attacking you, because it's easier to attack you when you feel vulnerable and weak like that. And so that's something or good to have in mind, right? That when you're feeling weak and vulnerable, that's when you are most weak and vulnerable, I suppose. So to have that knowledge, right, and to know that part of that weakness and vulnerability is the influence of the spirits, and you can do something about that by becoming aware. You're like, you can think, I'm in a very bad situation right now. However, let me collect myself and see what I can do from here, turn things in a more positive direction. And I also include here that this is when your calls for assistance from higher spirits will be the most fervent. There's that saying that, like, I forgot how it goes. Basically, it says that, no one goes to church when things are going well. And unfortunately, that's kind of true. But as much as, we criticize that idea, it's also, we can use it to our advantage in the situations where we are, things are going very poorly for us, because that's when our calls are the most, passionate, I guess you could say. And so if you really, really want help from the higher spirits, you will get assistance, and you just have to feed that, nourish the positivity, nourish the love, nourish your desire to get to a better place, and the spirits will help you. So the fourth idea here is awareness and acceptance of emotions. So I have a bit of a lengthy paragraph here. And the reason I have that is because I just wanted to concretize this idea, because it's kind of a sort of philosophical and self-helpy in a way, and I don't have this all in my mind yet, so I thought I'd write it down. So somewhat contrarily, and I'm saying contrarily to the feedback loop idea, which is to break the negative emotions cycle, right? It is also important to accept negative thoughts and emotions when they are experienced. Keep in mind, accept does not mean a passive stance towards them. Rather, it means to recognize that you are having them, that they are a part of you at the moment, and to own them. Many people choose simply to push these thoughts and emotions away, but this does not get rid of them, as various schools of psychology will confirm. Those thoughts and emotions must be brought to the surface and dealt with face to face, even though this is often a painful process. But there is no growth without pain, it is said. And so basically the idea here is that, and I think Alan Watts, philosopher, said this. He said that there are no wrong emotions. And I think that's really important, because if you're having emotion, if you're experiencing an emotion, even if it's a really bad emotion, right? Let's say you have a significant other and you feel very angry towards them. And maybe your first reaction is, I shouldn't feel that, like that. It's bad that I'm feeling angry towards my significant other. And, who knows, it might be bad. But the truth is that you feel that. And the reality of that feeling doesn't go away if you decide that, I'm going to pretend like I wasn't angry, or I'm going to ignore it because it's bad. Our emotions don't work like that. And I think there's a lot of evidence that suggests that if you have a feeling, it's there. And because it's there, maybe we should deal with it. I think the best thing to do is to deal with it as soon as possible and as honestly as possible. Being honest. Essentially, this acceptance of emotions is just honesty about your emotions. And so before you judge yourself, before you say this is a bad feeling, you should first of all accept that you're having the feeling. I feel this right now. Whatever part of me, which might be imperfect, is summoning up this emotion. And I actually think this is so important, because something that I've found is that emotions are the most, the most accessible form of self-knowledge that we have, I think, right? Because Spiritism always talks about, know yourself. That's how we evolve. And I think the best way to know yourself is to focus on your emotions, to pay attention to your emotions, because they're telling you what you feel, right? Especially if you feel anger, if you feel jealousy, if you feel sadness, they're pointing to something. And so that's a great starting point for discovering, why do I feel this? What can I do to maybe start working on these feelings? But the first step is to accept that you're having them. And but just that acceptance, by the way, I think that is crucial regarding the influence of spirits, because once you accept the emotion, that's when the emotion no longer has control over you. Because once you push it out, right, push it out of your consciousness and out of your immediate awareness, it's somewhere in there, and you're not paying attention to it, and so it's going to start steering you in the wrong direction. Often I've been in a situation where I just snap at somebody, right, maybe at a family member. And then later I wonder, why did I do that? Like, I shouldn't have gotten that upset. What was it? They didn't do anything to me. And I am certain that it's because maybe I was accumulating feelings during the day and I was just not dealing with them. I was, maybe too busy to deal with them, and they resurfaced unexpectedly. And that's what emotions do. They will resurface unexpectedly if you don't deal with them as soon as you can, right? So that's one way to establish control, is to take everything at, deal with it face to face. Try to be as honest as you can with yourself about your feelings. Otherwise, your feelings will have more control over you than you over them. And the last concept here, not too much to say about it, is the acceptance of the struggle of life. Although, maybe there's a lot to say about it, but I think it's a very straightforward idea, which is that life is difficult, and resentment about the difficulty of life only makes it more difficult. Practice humility and gratitude at every opportunity. So it's interesting, because being upset at how hard life is actually makes life harder. And so that kind of rules out being angry and wanting revenge against, God or even other people. It rules that out as the proper thing to do when things are difficult, right? Because that's just adding fuel to the fire. And that idea sort of permeates everything, because as we said, the negative feeds the negative. And that's how, that's how that applies in this situation. And a way to deal with resentment, to feel it less often, and to, when you feel it, have a way to shut it down, so to say, is to practice humility and gratitude at every opportunity, right? Things are bad, but that doesn't mean, first of all, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, right? Something you can always do is just focus on the fact that you're breathing, focus on the fact that you're alive, right? That is a privilege. And you can begin to see that just by appreciating You can, one thing to do, I said, focus on your breath. Appreciate what your body does for you, right? Appreciate how it's always running and working so hard without your effort, right? It's doing all these things by itself, and it's allowing you to experience life. And so just being grateful for your body, being grateful at every opportunity, and humility comes in, because if you're feeling very resentful, I think that is because that's a lack of humility, right? That's saying, I wanted things to be my way and they're not my way, and so I'm going to get angry about that. Well, you don't know what's good for you, right? That's something that we also learn in Spiritism, is that the negative things that happen to us, they happen to us because that's what's supposed to happen. That is in our plan for growth, right? And so have some humility in those situations. Think, things are very bad right now, but there's a reason for that. And if I navigate this properly, I will come out of this a stronger person and a better person. And that is absolutely the truth, right? That's the point of our trials on this earth, right? It's the world of trials and expiations. And so, and the last little asterisk here is prayer, right? Mateus talked about that a little bit. Prayer is an exceptionally powerful tool, right? When things are good, when things are bad, communication with the higher spirits, thanking, asking, just having that connection with the spiritual realm is so important. And prayer can be an instrument, because prayer operates off of our free will. You have to decide to pray. You have to decide that you really want the help from the higher spirits. But once you do decide those things, then you will now have influence, not just like there's the influence of the spirits that is involuntary, more or less, which can be pulling you down, right? The negative influences. But now you're establishing some influence by asking for spiritual assistance, right? And so prayer is an extremely powerful tool for your internal locus of control, right? So that's something that I don't think you can emphasize it enough, how important prayer is. And so, just as a conclusion here, spirits influence our happiness and our suffering. We've seen that if we align our vibrations with the higher spirits, then our influence, the influence we receive from the spiritual world, is one that increases our happiness. Whereas if we feed our negative feelings, if our thoughts and our feelings are of a negative quality, right, and we continuously feed them, then the influence will continue to bring us suffering and negativity. And something that I sort of a way of what's it called? A way of looking at the influence of spirits is that the influence of spirits acts as a multiplier, right? So if you already have positive emotions, then the influence of spirits, right, or if you already have a positive vibration, then the influence sort of multiplies that positivity. And if you have negative vibrations, then the influence multiplies that negativity. So, let's aim for the higher vibrations and to stay, to keep our thoughts and emotions in a higher range of vibrations. And just as a last note here, especially regarding the youth, right? Especially as young adults, we sometimes feel inexplicably sad, anxious, or angry. We may also randomly feel happy, loving, and free. Knowing that the spirits play a part in this, we may orient our thoughts and vibrations away from imperfection and towards God, giving us more control over our emotions and bringing us closer to a more elevated state of being. So yeah, that's it for my presentation.
Thank you, Leo. And without further ado, let's hear from Sarah. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Leo, Mateus, for that wonderful, I'm sharing my screen here, a wonderful talks. And my presentation sort of encompasses the closing aspects of it, if you will. So let's just jump right in and take a look at what mediumship looks like in teenagers. And I think that Mateus and Leo already touched up on this, but as Leo was mentioning, teens are going through a pivotal point in their development between the ages of 13 to 21, which is when they're most likely to feel the most influence from spirits. And this is because as the sexual forces within a teenager are being developed, the pineal gland is starting to release hormones to develop in one's libido. Excuse me. As these hormones are being released in concordance with the development of the body, the pineal gland becomes a hub of energy, if you will, that gives rise to many paranormal experiences. And the pineal gland was once referred to as the third eye, and it's really fascinating how this tiny gland sits right in between the two hemispheres of the brain, and it gives rise to so many experiences that we endure today. And you can kind of see the pineal gland right above the ear there. So what else does it look like in teenagers? How does it look like in us? So according to this passage I found in the book Adolescence in Life by Eduardo and the Spirit, Joan D'Angelis, the spirit reincarnates in order to redress past mistakes and build the shrine of goodness inside itself. These things, such as psychotic disorders, insecurities, neurotic disorders, etc., are more than likely stemming from past lives, and as we get older, these issues are brought out. And as teenagers, we're finding out who we are. We need help awakening our adolescence from school, family, and ultimately Spiritism. That really plays a part, and that helps. So why is it important for us as teens to learn about the faculty of mediumship? According to the gospel, mediumship is connected to an organic disposition with which any person may be endowed, just as that of seeing, hearing, and speaking. So mediumship is an organic faculty, as my dad will always tell me when I was growing up, when I was little. I always heard those words in my head, organic faculty. And again, according to the book Adolescence in Life, at this stage of intellectual development, the psychic exchange with discarnates becomes more visible and fertile, requiring special care to guide the sensitive adolescent to the concepts of love and self-enlightenment, as well as the enlightenment of one's neighbor and society as a whole. So mediumship is super important because us adolescents, we're a human in progress. We all are adolescents, adults, and we have past lives and mistakes to amend in this life. And it is important that we are consciously making the effort to learn through good morals and discipline as a means to help our evolutionary process. And this is really important because we don't really know how much past lives play such a huge role in our current lives. And I read this book in the center when I was growing up, Message from a Teen in the Spirit World, and there were a couple key things that I got from that book. And one of them being, we all reincarnate for a reason to continue on our path towards perfection during each lifetime. And we are born into our families for a reason, and we have certain mental disorders that stem from our past lives, etc. I always thought about this when I was growing up, how I was born into a Spiritist family. I grew up going to the center. I grew up doing activities for the center. I grew up going to the symposium, participating in the retreats, and I always thought to myself, this is for a reason. I was born into these families for a reason, to learn for a reason. And according to a little passage in the book, all young people of this kind experience very difficult trials here because they have to repair the wrongs they committed in the world with complete disregard for their parents' instructions or the good advice of older persons. That's why it's so important for many teens to listen to their parents and their elders, because they're actually trying to help us and not let us make the same mistakes that we've made in past lives. And I've had my fair share of rebellious moments with my parents, and I'm sure every other teenager can relate when you feel like you know more than your parents, but it's not always the case. It's important to make a conscious effort to listen to them and heed to their advice, because they're looking out for us. And it's really important to make sure that we don't have the same cycles that we have from our past lives. So I'm going to talk more in depth about how past lives affect our current lives. So in the book Psychiatric and Spirit Obsession Disorders, there is a passage and it says, "It is up to the individuals, however, the firm decision to conquer their bad inclinations, the legacies from the past that reemerge in the form of conflicts and deceiving needs." And many, or not all, I'm not saying all, but many psychiatric disorders such as depression, anxiety, eating disorders, bipolar depression, etc., you name it, every psychiatric disorder in the book can present itself in this life, but more than likely stems from issues in your past life. This is a common thing with people with depression. They tend to feel very guilty. This is just an example. They tend to feel very guilty. They always feel bad. And that likely stems from something in your past life. Your anxiety that presents in this life is likely stemming from something that you haven't dealt with in your past life. And as teenagers, there's a lot of, especially with this whole COVID and quarantine thing, I see a lot of teenagers, especially on, TikTok, the famous social media, are coming out with this whole depression thing and eating disorders and anxiety. And I see all of it. And I really think that as, we're going through this important part of development in our life, and how Leo was saying, the cycle of, I think he said reincarnation closes once you are a teenager. These issues are presenting, and there's a case in psychiatric and obsession disorders about a spirit worker that fell into drug addiction as he was crushed by memories of behavioral problems from a relatively close past life. And due to a lack of vigilance coupled with other moral weaknesses, he had succumbed to the allure of addictive drugs. It's very important, very, very important that we pay attention to our tendencies and obsessions, especially as a teenager, because, like I said, more than likely it's stemming from past lives. And many teenagers, especially people who I thought were my friends, teenagers are interested in going out and partying, doing drugs, all this stuff. And then many people that I've seen in my, close circle have fallen into addiction. And it's really sad because it's more than likely, I keep saying this, but it's so true, stems from past life. You carry all these tendencies and these tendencies to do this, that, and the other. And it's all connected. It's all just a web of, habit and tendency. And we need to make sure that we get the help that we need in order to break these cycles from our past lives. So, all in all, how can teens maintain and balance mediumship in their daily lives? So, you can read and study about the topic of mediumship. I remember as a kid, I would always attend the book study sessions, and I never really understood what was going on because I think I was like 8 years old at the time when I started to go to the big adult group study sessions. But there are many like kid books out there and books for teenagers that are pretty easy to read. And it's also important that we cultivate good habits in order to attract good influences only. So it's very important that, when your mom is yelling at you, clean your room, put away your laundry, she's not saying it for no reason. They say that when you have a clean space, you have a good headspace, something like that. And that's honestly so true. If you have good habits of keeping your room tidy and maintaining other life habits, that's pretty good. It's also very important that we are selective with our friendships, relationships, entertainments, because they may be the source of bad influences. We might not know it, but just as spirits influence us, other people influence us as well. When you're constantly surrounded by friends who just want to party, do drugs, any sort of bad entertainment, you're more than likely to succumb to these influences of your friends. I remember I was with the wrong crowd in high school, and it really influenced me in a not so good way. So it's very, very important that we pick people in our inner circle that have good intentions. It's important that we also observe our feelings and talk to our parents, spirit center educator for any help or guidance. I know as teenagers, kind of talking to our parents is sort of taboo, because we want an unbiased opinion. So you don't even have to talk to a spirit center educator. You could talk to a guidance counselor at school, a trusted adult, even a friend. Good people will always help you with guidance, and more than likely, I think Mateus or Leo mentioned this, maybe not, but usually in our inner circle, our friends or any other people, they're influenced by the good spirits to try and help us, So another thing is also to pray always. When you pray, you're always highering your vibration. I have started praying a lot more recently. I'm going to be honest, I kind of fell out of it the last couple of weeks, due to school and stress, but it's important that we don't fall off and we just try and pray whenever we can, even if it's not a lengthy prayer, if it's just a few words saying like, please help me with this assignment I have or something like that. The good spirits are always looking out for you. And before bed, pray and ask to be assisted during your hours of sleep. When we go to sleep, we're always taken somewhere good. At least if you pray before bed, like sometimes when I pray before bed, I'm like, can I be counseled about something? And I wake up feeling very energized, and I usually have this weird cryptic dream if I do like a deep meditation or prayer before I sleep that has a huge meaning to me in the morning. So yeah, it's always important to just pray always, And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who made this possible for the youth panel. And that's pretty much it for me.
All right. Thank you so much. Didn't I say you guys were going to be impressed by how wonderful they are? I know I am. It amazes me how much knowledge and depth and understanding they have. And I think it was also great to hear directly from them, even when they touched upon, basic concepts of mediumship and spiritism, for the youths watching to see it is something of interest and it's something of relevance. And putting all these, special touches and personal experiences, you guys have just done a most wonderful, wonderful presentation. And I am very proud and happy to be here with you guys today, and happy to be sharing you guys with the whole world, but the United States in particular. We're going to start with some questions and answers. So I'm going to try to keep up with, the comments coming in, the questions coming in, and see how we can make the most of the rest of the time. But I just so excited and amazed about how wonderful you guys have done, and how much you guys are benefiting all the youths that are watching and learning from you guys. All right, so let's see here. We have some questions, and I would like to start with one that I think it was briefly touched upon, but I think considering the reality of everyday lives that we have right now is, do social media and the internet play a role in the influence of spirits on youth? So talking a little about how social media and the internet impact this dynamic of the influence of spirits in our lives.
I can try to answer this. Oh, you want to go first?
You can go. It's okay.
Okay. I was just going to say, so regarding social media, I think there are, because we often say that it's a tool, right? And it can have a lot of benefits. And I do believe that. But I do think that there is what's it called? There is influence regarding social media and the spirit realm. And a couple ways that there's influence. I think the first one is the content that you consume, right? I think you actually said this, Sarah. You're talking about how we have to be careful about what we entertain ourselves with, right? And so you can find pretty much anything on social media, and you will be probably not lured, but you will be shown what you want to see, right? And you can be suggested things as well. And so if you are someone who gravitates towards negative things, you're going to find a whole bunch of that on social media. And certainly platforms like Twitter are full of venomous criticism and negative things all the time. And so if you're constantly spending a long time, right, like a large portion of your day looking at those things, that will definitely have an influence on your influence. And there's a positive side to that as well, right? Because there is a lot of good that comes from social media. There's a lot of self-help out there nowadays from actual credible sources, and so you can get your daily motivation to do good and to aspire to greater successes and to do to align yourself with good things. However, I think that from a macro view of just what social media is, it can be a very distracting thing, right? Often we find ourselves delaying our important and good work in order to use social media, right? And I think that the spirits, especially the imperfect spirits who want to harm you, they will definitely use that as a temptation, right? Oh, you can start the assignment in 20 minutes and 30 minutes. Like just watch one more YouTube video, just go on Twitter, go on Instagram, because it's so easy, right, to delay work by looking at those things. And you might even be looking at productive things. That's the funny thing. Or not productive things, but things that aren't bad, but they are delaying you from more productive activity, which is more difficult than just scrolling on your phone. So yeah, I think there's a lot of influence there, especially because as youth, right, our attention is so dedicated to these things nowadays that of course it's going to be intertwined with the spirit's influence. So yeah.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything to it, Sarah?
No, he touched on everything that I was thinking.
Got it. All right. So here's another one. Do you think in the young age we are more open to mistaking spirits? I think it's relating to that question about our young adulthood, or this age of the 13 to young adult. We're consolidating our spiritual reality and settling in, like Leo said. But also we're still less experienced and trying to figure things out, figure out who we are, what we want from life, and so many other factors. So do you think that makes us more vulnerable to mistaking spirits? And you can go ahead, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay. I 100% definitely do think I mean, this is my personal opinion. I think it does make us more vulnerable, especially if you are surrounding yourself with the wrong crowd of people. A couple of months ago, a while ago, I lose track of time with school. A while ago, I was figuring out who I was in the world, and I was surrounding myself with people who I thought were good, and I found myself falling into this depressive episode, I guess you could say. And that was due to the fact, not specifically because of the people, but because the energies that were surrounded those type of people. And I thought that me being with those people was me just finding myself. When in actuality, we have to be careful because, like I said, when between those ages of 13 to 21, like how Leo said, those reincarnation cycles are closing and we're finding out who we are, the whole pineal gland situation, we're susceptible to many spirits that we think are good, but in reality, they're not really good, So it's very important that we, as teenagers especially, protect our energies, pray and keep even if you're not a spiritual person, it's important that you just cultivate good habits in your life, because oftentimes us as teenagers will be influenced by the negative spirits, and we won't even know it until we're knees deep in the bad pool of bad energies. So I think we're vulnerable during that time. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I hear a lot of the things that I'm hearing from you guys is that we heard the good influence, the negative influence, but I think because of where you guys are within development, the 18 to 21, where you're becoming whole with whom you are as far as your past lives, your whole spiritual baggage, and then also this new state in life where a lot needs to be learned, it does make you guys a little more vulnerable. And then it's important not just what you consume as far as social media and YouTube and movies, but also who you hang out with, because all those things are going to bring influences. And being that I am much older, I have to say I'm happy that Sarah did say, maybe ask your parents or ask an adult. We adults don't have all the answers, but we definitely have lots of mistakes that we can share with you guys that maybe can help. So the question that comes exactly on that note, as a parent, how can we help our teens, appreciate Spiritism, what it has to offer, and even create this bond of being made available to them, because there is a natural resistance. So, how can we as parents help teenagers better understand and integrate Spiritism in their lives?
Uh, so first of all, the parents need to appreciate what Spiritism has to offer. One of the jobs that parents have when we reincarnate is to guide and raise their kids. So why would you expect your kids to appreciate what Spiritism has to offer if you don't? So the first thing is that you need to guide through your example. Second is, as much as Spiritism is a doctrine, it is extremely serious. Don't be so serious that you almost sound condescending. So just don't say, if you are a bad person, you're going to umbral, or you're gonna suffer like André Luiz did. Instead, say, hey, it's not good what you're doing, and here's why. So you should be a good person, and also create a bond as a parent and a kid. Don't be just a teacher. Be a guide. Be an example. Be a parent.
Wow. Anyone else want to tag along on this one?
I can say something really quickly. I just wanted to say that in my experience, practice always beats theory. And so rather than being a figurehead for Spiritism, if you know how to spout back, questions from the Spirits book, I would say that it's almost like maybe the best Spiritist parent would be one where the kid doesn't even know that they're Spiritist, because they've so thoroughly integrated Spiritism into what it means to just be a person, right? To live on this earth, that through their advice, through their example, they are showing you as the child how to be a proper individual, right? Because at the end of the day, Spiritism, what it's trying to do is to help us become better spirits, right? It's not here for us to memorize the Spirits book. That's not the purpose. And so I would just say practice what you preach, right? Which is kind of what Mateus is talking about as well. I think that's the most effective way to teach. And as we know, Jesus never wrote down a single word, right? So he was all example. And so maybe that really is the best model.
Yeah. I just want to share how thankful I am for this answer, because, we hear a lot of, don't talk the talk, but walk the walk. And I have to say, just as an educator myself, a lot of times that's the challenge that we face ourselves as well, where a lot of times, teenagers and kids, they're needing support and guidance, and the parents expecting the kids to get better, not acknowledging their role. So, I am glad that you guys are saying it first, because it helps us as parents to really put this into perspective and call upon ourselves to rethink and reevaluate what a good parent we are being, but also to help other young adults and youths and kids to really learn to advocate for what they need. And, piggybacking again, if they cannot get it from their parents, which that's who they should be able to, they can always go to a guidance counselor. They can go to a trusted friend. They can go to a family member, but remember that they're never alone. Thank you. All right, so the next question is this. After listening yesterday to all the struggles the young Fox sisters went through, suffering exploitation from inside family, oppression from society, church, etc., how can you rate the guidelines set by Allan Kardec in the Medium's book in helping you carry out your daily activities as youth while sensing the spirits' presence and their influence? So they're referring to some of the lectures from yesterday, and referencing the Fox sisters, who were part of disseminating Spiritism in the United States, and they were mediums. Ostensively, like Mateus taught us, right? So I guess the question is saying, how can you balance out, as a youth, if you have ostensive mediumistic abilities, and then managing your everyday struggles?
Well, so obviously, right, if you are an ostensive medium, then mediumship will be an important part of your life, right? You will have that influence. And I don't think that should keep you from being just a normal person either, right? There's some people, like in the story of the Fox sisters, they lived a very difficult life, right? Where they really had no time for anything other than these experiments that they were doing and focusing on their mediumship. And there are people like that, right? Givaldo Franco is an example, someone who although it's interesting because he also worked a job, right, while throughout his life, right? He wasn't just a medium. He wasn't just someone who advocated Spiritism. He actually did work. And so I think that if you are a medium, if you have these ostensive medium capabilities, then obviously you have to dedicate some time of your life to understanding and working on this ability, but that shouldn't keep you from carrying on with your daily life. Obviously, I think that by reading the Medium's book, by learning about mediumship, you'll be able to have a better hold on this ability, and which will actually allow you to live a more productive life outside of just purely your mediumship. So yeah, I mean, I don't have that ability. So, maybe if somebody here has more direct personal knowledge of this, they could be more helpful, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Leo. The next question is, how do we stop the negative feedback loop when it's often habitual thinking that feeds and fuels it? So I think we're asking about changing, the cycle. Once we get into that cycle of the negative, how do we pull ourselves out of it? So maybe Sarah can help us touch base on that one.
Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button, but I think that when you're in a negative feedback loop, and I know Leo touched on this, it's very hard to get out of it, I don't know who asked the question, but it's true. It's habitual thinking. Once you are in that position, you can't get out of it because it's all you know. I think that when you are in a negative feedback loop and you can't, I think Leo was talking about the internal locus. I think that when you can't seem to change what's within you, start to change what's, external in your environment. So that would be, maybe make it a habit to keep your room clean. Maybe make it a habit to read 10 pages of a self-help book every day, even if you don't want to. Maybe make it a habit to listen to a podcast that's very, enlightening. Make it a habit to fit some time to pray in your day. Just doing small little things that, start to make you feel better. And you're going to keep wanting to do more of those things. And then therefore you can hopefully turn into a positive feedback loop. It's very hard for people, with depression or any other, even if you don't have depression, if you're just in a negative funk, it's very hard to, get out of that. But it's important that even if you can't fix what's within you, try to fix what's, outside of you. And even if you can't find the strength to clean your room or, do any of that stuff, try and do something small, like maybe listen to that podcast or do a little prayer. But that's my take on it. I don't know if anybody else wants to, go. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just to say something about that, because I really like how you said, sometimes we can't, we aren't these masters of self-knowledge, which can, who can just change who we are on the inside, especially that's, like overnight or anything. But it's interesting how we always have free will in some way, right? And the thing about changing what's going on externally, and you did mention self-help. It's funny because in the world of self-help, especially around the more athletic people that I follow who are like self-help people, they wouldn't even call themselves that. They're just living this lifestyle that people seem to admire. And they say as athletes, like there's days where you don't feel like doing anything, right? You don't want to get out of bed early. You don't want to go for that run. But what do? You do it anyways, right? And that's kind of a brutal answer in a way. But it goes to show how even when you feel like you can't do it, you actually can. And it might be just a little step, just to, just get moving, just do something. And so no matter how strong these habits are, right, there's always something you can do to move to, even if it's a tiny little step, you can take that tiny little step and you take more of those steps and eventually you are free from the loop. So it's about, once again, internal locus of control, remembering that you can do something, whether it's internal or external, you always have something that you can do.
Okay. Yeah, it's making a change, right? If you're always in the same system, in the same routine, it's a pattern that just gets more fixated. It's just like any other routine. If you have to, eat breakfast, you may not think about what you're doing or taking a shower or going to school. Once you shift and you make a break, that's when you can recreate a new pattern, a new system, right? All right, so we have a very interesting question coming from Pablo that I would like all of you guys to share with us. It says, can you please guys talk about the impact of Spiritism in your lives in the context of the pandemic, and how, as a Spiritist. So I think we're looking for your understanding of Spiritism principle. How has that impacted you during this very, unpredicted year with the pandemic and all the challenges that it brought? And maybe we can start with Mateus, please.
So as a Spiritist, I faced the pandemic as a chance to change and think a lot, because we had a lot of time to think while we were being locked out. So the first thing is that the Earth is transitioning to a planet of regeneration, and we may consider this as a start. So we also need to become better persons. So I reflected a lot during the pandemic, like a lot. I reflected a lot about my life and the things that happened. So as a Spiritist, we need to embrace it as an opportunity to change, to become better, and also be grateful for the things that we had. Because while it's true that at some point of our lives during the pandemic we couldn't go out, we still had a lot of things like food. We could still breathe. We're still alive. A lot of people died. We need to be grateful for what we have and do things better next time. Because before the pandemic, I used to be really shy. I didn't really like talking to people. And after the pandemic, I realized chatting is really fun. It's really good to meet new people. While I'm still a little shy, I even got better from it. So
Great.
We need to embrace the pandemic as an opportunity to change ourselves.
Thank you. Sarah?
I 100% agree with everything that Mateus said. I definitely also took the pandemic as a means of changing myself. I reflected so much about myself and my values and who I really was as an individual in society, and how I could, change my bad habits. Sorry, I'm just trying to read the question. I think that as a Spiritist, I definitely viewed the pandemic as, okay, this is definitely for a reason. This is definitely for a huge reason why we're all locked up in the house for, countless hours with our family. At least for me, it really made me open my eyes to appreciate my family more, to appreciate everything that they've done for me. The roof over my head. And Mateus was saying, we're so lucky to be able to just breathe and, be able to eat, be able to sleep in a bed. And it definitely taught me to appreciate life more, and really reevaluate the friendships and the relationships that I had. And I can say with confidence, I am not the same person I was a year ago, and I've changed for the better. And I still have, I hope my mic isn't rubbing against my hair, I still have a long journey ahead of me. But as a Spiritist, I've definitely taken the time to also, get into the habit of meditation, just cultivating good habits, kind of how I was saying in my presentation. Yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Right. Thank you. Leo?
Yeah, well, I'm with you guys on all of that. And maybe what happened with me might be exactly what you guys are talking about, but maybe to a little more extreme, actually. Well, it's funny because I might have been the opposite. I think I was too reflective, or maybe not reflective. I was thinking too much, because there's a difference between thinking and actually reflecting. Because if you reflect, then there's a higher probability that you're going to discover something about yourself. Whereas when you're thinking, you might be constructing your own ideas, which aren't actually as accurate as the truth. And so I've always been someone who does a lot of thinking. And I was actually happy with the pandemic. I was like, oh, wow, this is an even better opportunity for me to continue thinking. And what happened is I ended up moving out into California by myself, because I transferred to a new school. And I was by myself. I didn't have any roommates. I didn't know anybody in California either, so I was completely isolated. And I thought this was going to be a good thing, because then I could just resume what I always loved to do. But it wasn't a good thing because I began to not feel very well. My anxiety and stress were increasing. I didn't have anyone there to help me out. And I just ignored all these things, and I just stayed how I was. So it's funny because it's almost like I was going against learning something from this experience, and I was just kind of being arrogant in my own thoughts and thinking that I could, figure something out, transform myself, all these things just by creating something in my mind. And then finally, I was, it got to the point where I was feeling very bad. I was not in my right mind. And I called my mom. I said, can I go home for a while? And they had actually been wanting me to go back, or they said, like, if you're not feeling well, please come home. And so then I did come home. And that's when I began to be grateful. I stopped, just thinking so much. I stopped and I just began to appreciate the little things, right? Like you're breathing, the fact that you're alive. And then all of these lessons started. I started learning all these lessons, right? By just, letting go, by stopping, by not trying to control everything so much, and just being grateful for where I am right now. And obviously I was brought closer to my family. I appreciate my family more. Now I'm so thankful to them. Whereas before, I think I was not as grateful as I should have been. And so, yeah, I kind of learned a lot of lessons through some suffering, I guess, but that's what I needed. And I'm so much happier now and so much better. So yeah, it's my experience. Oh, you're on mute again, did you?
Okay, now I'm muted. I want to say thank you for sharing this, all of you guys, because I think, it's the eternal struggle of youthhood, of trying to claim their own independence and their freedom and their free will while still being under the influence of your parents, whether you're dependent on them for money or housing or whatever the situation may be. And I think the examples you guys gave is that there can be a coexistence without an over-dependence. So, even though you may not feel comfortable asking your parents everything or coming to them for everything, being close to them or having that interaction or being home can just be enough to give you that support while you're still out there identifying who you are and doing your own thing. So it gives messages for both parents who try to hoover too much or kids who try to be too independent, that maybe a balance of it, kind of meeting in the halfway, gives the both worlds to everybody. So, thank you for sharing. All right, so the next question comes from Claudia Nunes, and she says, since one spirit influences another, is there anything you can recommend to other teens to do when it comes to influencing the other teen spirits that surround us? So my understanding, she's asking, how can we influence teens spirits that are around us, right? So they're in the spiritual realm.
I can go first then. I think I'm going to default back to my other answer, which is, firstly, I think is by just being, right? Being a good person, or good is a strong word, but by being the best that you can be. Because as we know with vibrations, there's something that you feel, not something that you tell somebody. You don't have to tell them what level of vibrations you are. That's something that we feel from one another, right? And so just by being someone whose vibrations are at a higher level, just being around other people, you're already helping them, and they're going to notice that. They're going to, even if they don't know it, at the surface level of consciousness, they might think to themselves, or not even think it, but their body might just be like, wow, I feel a lot better when I'm around this person. I have no idea why, but their company just is very positive for me, and that's one reason. But something, maybe an answer that would come after that, because I think that is the most important thing, would be just be a good friend, be there for them. When they're in a difficult situation and they feel like you're someone they can come to for help, most likely you will be someone of help to them. And by the things that you say, right, by the way that you help them, you will be emitting a positive influence on them. So, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. So the next question we have here is, how can a teenage help a friend who's non-spiritual? So somebody who is not a spiritist, but that may need help either with spiritual influence or with sense of depression. So how to help another team that may not believe what we believe in. Mateus?
So the first thing will be pray. Pray for a friend a lot, because he may not be a spiritual friend, but you could invite them to be a spiritist. But even if they refuse, pray for them even more. Also, ask for advice from your spiritist advisor in your center, because if he's showing signs of mediumship, maybe the guys from the other side, from the other side on the spiritual realm, might help them. Because sometimes mediums don't necessarily become ostensive mediums. Sometimes it's better off that they just become the normal mediums like we are. Yeah. So but in the other side, if a friend is showing a sign of depression, try to help them, and also again pray for them. Pray is probably the best remedy that you can provide. Second to fraternal love.
Okay. Anyone else want to pitch in on this one?
I would just say, because Mateus said, like, I think he said something like invite them to, or introduce them to Spiritism, or invite them to participate in some kind of Spiritist thing. That gave me the idea of, like, with what you're saying with prayer, invite them to pray. Maybe like you tell your family, hey, I have this friend, and maybe we could do sort of a prayer session, and then you just tell them, you say, hey, like, I know you don't really believe this kind of stuff, but would you be willing to just participate in this prayer session with me just once, just to check it out? And if they are your friend, I doubt that they would be like, no, like I don't want to do that. Like I think that they would be open to that. And so, as prayer works, they are going to feel better. And then you can ask them, so how was it? And I really think that they would consider that, consider something beyond what they already know, if that did help them, which it certainly would help them. So that would be something you could do.
Great. Guys, we're coming up to the end of our session. I truly have no more ways to express my gratitude and my appreciation and how impressed I am with the three of you and the insight and maturity that you guys have demonstrated. I always like to emphasize, as an advocate for youth and children, how impressed and what a wonderful job you guys have done. Obviously, your parents have a lot to do with it, but I do not take the credit from your motivation, especially at a time in your lives when it's so easy to get distracted with other, so more, I don't want to say more relevant, but in the world that we live in, school, college, all these things have such a weight on your lives that you guys stay committed to Spiritism, and especially committed to sharing your thoughts so that other youths and teens and kids can benefit from it too. So from the bottom of my heart, all the Spiritist educators, all the parents, all the youths, I just want to thank you guys for the service that you have done today. And I'm sure that you'll be felt by many for a long time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well said, Ligia, and thank you, all of you. And thank you, Ligia, for leading the effort of a director of the youth and children in Spiritist education. And thanks to each one of you, young adults, and for all your work that you have been doing. Continue on this path. And as Joao said actually earlier, right, it is through you that we are sure that Spiritism will have a great continuation in this nation, and it will continue to be strong in our lives as well. So thank you. I would like to also thank everyone who participated in these 2 days of learning with all of us, right? Thanking the young Spiritist speakers, all the speakers from yesterday and today. Thank you, Peter Hayes, for being the MC yesterday as well. And thanks to all the people that have been working behind the stage as well. This would not have happened with all your hard work as well. I would like to go over with you some of the final slides, some of the give me 1 second here to share this with you, the highlights that we have. And one will be there it is, that is important for our organizers, that those who have watched the symposium, to fill out our survey that can be found on our website, www.spiritistsymposium.org, and it will help us make improvements through your feedbacks as well on future events. We're coming to an end, but hang in there. There's more. But it's we already have the invitation for all of you to participate in next year's symposium that will take place in Houston, Texas. So keep your eyes open for more information, and hopefully next year we'll be able to be all together in person, and obviously virtually as well, since we will be broadcasting as we're broadcasting right now through the rest of the country, through the rest of the nation, and globally as well. But before concluding our symposium, I would like to invite our dear friend Marcelo Netto, the president of the Spiritist Federation of Florida, to guide us in a beautiful visualization for world peace and health. Let us welcome our dear friend Marcelo. Marcelo, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Leo. I was really pleased to be part of this wonderful event. And I was feeling very hopeful because I saw these three boys being conducted by Ligia, and I was truly, truly pleased by the future, this new generation that it's coming up, and to disseminate Spiritism. Well, I would like to invite each and every one of you to join me in this visualization, in this prayer, for the world's peace and for the health of our planet. I invite you also to close your eyes and try to dive within so we can together join in this moment. Dear Master Jesus, blessed friends, blessed friend of our lives, benevolent spirits, these are troubled days for humanity. Days filled with afflictions, doubts, and agony. In the frenetical attempt to find the pathway to happiness, looking for you out there in the external world, we forget to look for you within our hearts. You, Master of our lives, taught us over 2,000 years ago that the kingdom of God, the kingdom of true peace, is divine work to be built in the hearts of men and women, in humanity as a whole. This is why we ask you once again to teach us to love a bit more, dear Master. Teach us to vibrate with love for this home that we call Earth, the place that is the host for our existence, a place prepared by you since the beginning so that we could develop the blessed qualities of for our soul. Given our own limitations, we ask that you help us with your infinite love and compassion, while our hearts pulsate with the sincere wish for the health of all beings, not only physical, but also spiritual health. Please allow us to be part of this team of workers of the last hour, made up of men and women of sincere will and faith on both planes of life, that grows in number for the construction of the new world. Master, make us an instrument of your peace, because worse than the virus that have affected us at this time of this pandemic is the virus of hatred, intolerance, prejudice, envy, jealousy, and negativity that contaminates human by the masses, Master. The virus of war, all derived from the greatest infection of mankind, the predominance of pride and selfishness. As we attempt to fixate more and more within our hearts and minds the need to be meek, the need to be peaceful, but above all, to be the ones that promote, to be the peacemakers. Where there is hatred, help us to all of us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt in this world, help us to sow faith. Despair, hope. Darkness, light. Sadness, help us to be the one to promote joy. We need you so much, dear Jesus. Even during our current days, many of us are still so confused about you, lost in the idea that you came for the chosen people with privileges and prerogatives of the proud race, like the bloody conquerors of the past and present days. We fail to see that your words were meant to be understood as simply love one another, loving one another. Enlighten our souls, dear Jesus. Illuminate our world, Master. Help us to build peace and true health within, so that one day we may declare that indeed we follow you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear Jesus. So be it.
Thank you, Marcelo, for your kind words. And and we often hear the saying, Houston, we have a problem. But with the next event in mind, we all will be able to say that Houston, we have solutions. Perhaps not solutions for all our problems, but at least some of them. And on that note, we hope to see everyone next year in Houston, Texas. And may God bless all of us. And until next time, thank you.